Start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your Spin, and this is your Week 25 review show. Uh, Leading off with kind of what happened, I guess, last week. Arsenal follow up their 6-0 West Ham slam with a five-burger at Burnley. Arsenal are legit threats now, if people weren't taking them seriously before. I was one of those people, and then I really did change my mind after the Liverpool game. And it's not just that they had that great 6 score goal fest for versus West Ham that really did change my mind. It was seeing how it seemed Arteta was finding a different way to use Havertz and Trossard than he had before. And the second game in a row that they tried that, and man, the second game in a row that really works. Another thing that's starting to happen is Odegaard and Saka are really starting to come to life for them again. And maybe it's going to be beneficial that they had relatively slow starts to their season. Maybe they can actually end quite strong, because last year it was the exact opposite. Both were flying, and then they kind of petered out for the last like 10 or so games, and that coincided with them having some injury issues, them missing Saliba and Sinchenko down the stretch as well. Just yeah, it is Burnley, but that said, just a week ago, Burnley gave Liverpool a bit of a scare with a couple of those chances that Fofana was able to have, and Burnley were not able to lay a glove on Arsenal. This was quite impressive. Saliba and Gabriel aren't even really allowing shots on David Raya. Maybe people thought Raya was going to be a bit of an issue, and it hasn't happened so far. And so Arsenal are quite strong. Liverpool were able to survive their early morning fixture as well. It comes costly though. They lose both Curtis Jones and Diego Jota to injuries in the first half. Possibly looks like Jota's season is done. Maybe they can get him back for the last 5 games or so. They said maybe 2 months out, that's possibly the best case scenario, because it looked like it was going to be worse. Maybe he'll even be able to get in shape and be able to make yours, because it was only 2 years ago where unfortunately. Maybe even like a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, he got injured back in October and he had to miss the World Cup. And so he is just really unfortunate when it comes to injuries, and it's not muscle injuries usually. It's tendon stuff. So well, actually, that is muscle. No, tendon's different. So this is just really really unfortunate. What happens? Just Norgard kind of lands on him. It's just kind of a freak injury. Uh, but replacing him for Liverpool is not going to be easy. I mean, the thing with him is he doesn't just score; he scores significantly timely goals when he's healthy. It is a major blow, and so who is going to be able to maybe step up? It could be Nunez. Nunez has started to actually come good for Liverpool. He's had a very very weird season, because yes, he's still missing big chances, but at the same time, I think he's on 13 goals and 11 assists for this season in the league, and that's not a bad return at all, considering how much time is left in the season. But he also had tightness. He had to come off at halftime, so that was a bit of a scare as well. Maybe the one set of positive news for Liverpool fans was Salah returning, and he was able to feature. And I didn't actually think he looked 100% fit, but at 80%, he wasn't bad. I didn't feel like he was sprinting all out, but he was still quick, faster than the Brentford's back line, and he was able to end with a goal and assist, so that's not too bad. Gakpo looked good coming on as well. I have been a little bit worried about him. It's funny. The two players I was, kind of critical about after the Arsenal game was Gakpo and Gravenberch, and both came on and were quite good. To be fair to them, so that's solid. Connor Bradley returned, and that was a positive as well. Uh, and he looks good again. So so that's definitely positive moving forward. They're still going to be without Trent for a couple of weeks, and a note I had was Endo looking a little bit more like a key player and not just a squad rotation player for them going forward. Endo has started to look really good, and that's allowing McAllister to be a little further forward. And so the two of the three teams that played before the third team in the title race did what they were supposed to do. And what does Man City do? The team that everyone kind of had as favorites coming into this week, I think myself included, and we get a little upset in the cards. It's Chelsea don't necessarily win, but they do the double in terms of drawing. They get 2 draws over Man City, taking 4 points off them. And it's a mix of Chelsea generally playing some of the best football they have all season, at least in the first half. Just really, battling, but in the second half they were battling down the hatches a little bit, praying for dear life to hold on in the second half. That can happen. I do think Pochettino made some mistakes, which I'll get to. later on, at least his decisions in the second half. I thought he retreated a little bit too early, taking off Jackson, taking off Sterling, to bring on, it was like Cassaday, it was Nkuku, but Nkuku wasn't really offering an outlet to go above. And there was, I think he took off Cole Palmer for a defender. And basically they went to like five at the back and they didn't really have any outlet to relieve pressure. And that final 20-ish minutes, it was just Man City being able to recycle the ball back, in Chelsea's end. So you figured it was only a matter of time before the dams were going to break, and it did, and thankfully it didn't break a second time. Though Man City were going to be howling a little bit that they didn't get a late PK call, but we'll get to that later. And then in other news, Man United continue their winning ways ahead. It's not necessarily pretty, but every game is kind of the same way with them, so I can't necessarily knock it anymore. Injuries at the back though are starting to hurt them again. They lost Luke Shaw. He had to come off at halftime again, second game in a row. And because of Lisandro Martinez being out, Harry Maguire has to play again. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the last three games in a row, it has been, Man United have had to withstand having 20 shots on their goal. It was West Ham being one of them, Luton in this one, and then Aston Villa last week. So that's kind of the negatives. I mean, the two positive storylines is Kobe Mainoo and Casemiro together haven't lost a game yet, though Casemiro did not look necessarily right this game. Rasmus Højlund continues his purple patch with another two goals. And really, the only maybe negative for United is they start this game off on fire, scoring two goals, two quick goals, and were quite frankly on the back foot for the majority of the game after that. So that was maybe a negative. I thought Bruno was giving the ball away, and Rashford was kind of being poor with his decision making, where this easily could have been wrapped up maybe at halftime or early in the second half. Actually, Kaminsky was immense to keep Luton Town in the second half with so many 1v1s that he had to help save, which coincided with Man United just being really, really poor in their decision making as well. And then in other news, Aston Villa gets back into the top four thanks to what happens with Tottenham. But Villa had to do their own job first, and they get Paul Torres back, so that's a bonus. And you saw in this game how significant he is with his passing and decision making on the ball stuff. Not just as a defender, but what he actually offers on the ball. And Ollie Watkins with two goals, so that's positive again. Emery bounces back after that kind of disappointment to concede late versus Man United last week. But Aston Villa also had to hang on as well. Fulham really came alive in the second half, which we'll get to. And I mentioned it. Spurs do have a setback. They get most of their team back, and right as they do, right as they have Madison, right as they have Sarr, Basuma, right as they have the back line able to relatively go with Christian Romero and Van de Ven, all of a sudden they lose both fullbacks in Pedro Porro and Udogie. And I think it showed in this game. Also, Wolves didn't have Cunha, but they did have Wang and Neto get to go, and that was all they really needed. But it's a surprise here that actually gets both their goals, and it's Yao Gomez. So that was a bit of a surprise and a little setback for Tottenham, and it'll depend how long they are without Pedro Porro and Udogie, because Ange can't do this inverted stuff that he likes doing with his fullbacks, basically be extra players in midfield with Ben Davies and Emerson Royal. I mean, I think that's what we really saw as well. Newcastle bounced back last minute to draw Bournemouth, thanks to a very late goal by one of their own in Matt Ritchie. I think he was one of the last few players on the team that was there pre-takeover. So good for him. It was maybe a poor day at the office for Dubravka. The first one is just unfortunate. I can write that off as a slip. The second one, I do think he can maybe do better, but it's not just his fault. I think it's another game, and I hate to do agendas on players. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. But I don't really want to pick on someone. But I do think it's another game where Dan Burn has cost them, and basically it felt like Bournemouth were targeting Dan Burn and to good effect. I think that's what happened with the second goal. And then Sheffield and Burnley basically relegated themselves. So who is going to be the third team? And it could still be Luton, but Luton to me and Luton did have a chance last week, and it was a blown chance losing to Sheffield. But they, to me, and they were really unlucky to lose Adebayo, and it'll be important for them to not have him lost for that many weeks. I think I saw it would be a couple weeks with a bit of a hamstring pull. But because I think they maybe even beat Man United if Adebayo and Morris are able to play. But the positive for them is Barkley and Lokanga look a really solid middle of the pack kind of midfield for them, to be honest. They have good width with Ogbeni and and Doughty. They're both really good at creating chances. Doughty is very good at a kind of a open play delivery with his crosses. And when I mentioned how Man United were really poor with their decision making, I thought Luton were actually quite good in the final third. They were just kind of unlucky, whether or not it was maybe some late blocks. Varane and Johnny Evans were quite good in that second half. I kind of go at Evans and Man United a few times every now and then. Evans had to come on for Harry Maguire. I don't know if that was tactical or finally Ten Hag, realized that Maguire's a problem, and Evans came on, and for the most part, I mean, Luton still had their looks, but he was quite good at getting the right clearances and getting some key blocks, and him and Varane weren't terrible, but again, it's kind of the same story. They can't play a high line with those two as your back two, and so I think that's kind of been. But I don't have to necessarily go over that again. The Burnley, I don't think are done. Unfortunately for them, it was they can't lay a glove. They couldn't lay a glove on Arsenal, and it is Arsenal and Liverpool back to back. So it's hard to really judge them just on those two games. But it doesn't really seem like this team really is ready. Um, Sheffield and Sheffield are kind of historically bad. I think we could maybe say. I think they actually did say that they at this point in the season have conceded more goals than just anyone ever before them, which kind of says it all. They bring in Mason Holgate to maybe help some of their defensive issues. He was one of their signings in January. It was also Bremerton Diaz, and they haven't been able to play Ben Bremerton Diaz for the last couple of games. It was funny how they were actually able to get that win over Luton Town without Davies or Bremerton Diaz. And but Holgate had I thought he was poor versus Aston Villa. I thought a couple of most of the early goals that they conceded was basically him just not tracking runners behind him, and lo and behold, in 13 minutes he gets sent off with a horrid challenge. Instant red, no complaints on that. And it basically, Sheffield fans have seen teams score five at their stadium a lot recently. Brighton did it in the FA Cup game. I think that was 5-2 kind of game. Uh, Aston Villa just did it, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, and then they turn around and do it again here. I mean, the red card definitely played a role in it, but it's just Brighton just were kind of playing with the fear. It probably could have been any score they wanted to. Um, and then, so who is going to be that third spot? We have Brighton. I mean, we have Sheffield. We have Burnley, and there are a lot of contenders now. Everton and Crystal Palace with a monster game happened yesterday, and maybe it's just good that neither of them actually lost. So they both take a point. That actually put Everton above Luton in the table for goal differential. But I mean, basically, I think both of those teams are really thankful that Burnley and Sheffield are in their division this year because both of these teams look like they could possibly be certain to go down without that. I mean, there's just no with Everton at least there is an identity of what they want to do. It's just not necessarily easy to convert chances out of it. It was strange enough that they were actually able to have majority of possession, even though it just seemed I think in the first half, Pickford had more touches than uh, anyone on the field. So they just there was just no way to really pass through lines. Everything was kind of direct, and when the game became a little bit more stretched in the second half, that was when they really did start to get some of their chances. Crystal Palace is just completely at a loss. Their injuries have affected a lot of teams. Injuries haven't necessarily affected taking out star players for the season, like Crystal Palace. Maybe you could argue. They lost to Corey. They had never really been able to replace him. In fact, this game they went to a back three. They went to a different formation even. Adam Wharton, I think, was brought in to be a center back, and he's now being in midfield. He isn't doing terrible. To be fair to him, Chris Richards is having to play a lot of games now because Mark Gahey is now permanently injured, and he was important to what they were doing. I mean, it's key players in key positions everywhere. Gahey, Decore, center, the defensive midfielder for cover. One of the better holders and DMs in the league, at least last season. And then you have Elise and Eze both out. Now, they might be able to get Eze back sooner than Elise, but either way, it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to do much until they at least get one of those players back. Ayew is trying to help out. In last week versus Chelsea, Lerma had a great goal, but they are kind of reliant on stuff like that, maybe set pieces. Though they said that Crystal Palace hadn't scored on a set piece this year. Uh, I don't really know, and it does look like they have moved on from Roy Hodgson, and they brought in the manager from Eintracht Frankfurt, Oliver Glasnow, and he is a Yorba winning manager. And it is interesting that he is leaving. I think his Bundesliga team is like sixth place right now, and Frankfurt have been one of the more like fun, attacking, inventive sides over the last few years in Germany. It is interesting that he is taking a risk to take on this job because Palace are safe now, but they're only 5 points safe. And if Luton Town can just kind of get a little bit on a groove, and to me it feels like I kind of trust Barkley and Sambi Lokanga a little bit more now than I do Chris Palace. Though that said, I probably do trust Anderson, and I don't necessarily know if I trust Richards. I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to think about their backline. I think goal differential could definitely factor in if it does come between Palace and Luton Town. Who has the better defense? I think Kaminsky is probably a better keeper, but yeah, the Luton's back line has been quite rough. To be fair, so I would have to think about that. And then, if not for their earlier success, I think we would be talking about West Ham, which is crazy enough because they were sixth just a couple of weeks ago. They're now ninth, but they haven't won a game, and they haven't really looked competitive in a very long time. I think their last win was actually Arsenal in December. They missed some Paqueta, but Calvin, and in this game, Calvin Phillips just has continues to have his nightmare start to his West Ham career. And Forest aren't a team that's not safe either, but I do feel like Forest is starting to look a little bit more convincing than other teams around them. But that said, it looks like they might get hit with sanctions. So that could be the main thing that saves Everton and Palace and all these other teams. To be honest, if Forest do get a serious sanction hit, we'll have to see. That's still out. Yeah, there's still an Everton appeal that could happen. That could give Everton some points back. But there's also the possibility that Everton get hit with sanctions with additional sanctions as well. So there's still a lot of ways for this to change without even games being played. It is worth saying that. So that's kind of the run out, and I'm going to start with Liverpool and Brentford. I'm not going to try to be as detailed as I normally am because I'm going to try to save most of that for Man City and Chelsea because that really was kind of the marquee game of the weekend. And then I mean there is a lot to do, so I don't want it to be a 3 hour episode. So I'll try to go as quickly as and coherently as I can. So I will get to started. I will start with Liverpool and Brentford, and Liverpool do go on to win 4-1. So they don't slip up, so that's positive, but it does come at a cost. So the first goal with Darwin Núñez, just a wonderful, wonderful flick, and it starts with Jota just having a great flick on header, and Núñez does something I really didn't think he was capable of doing last year. So I think it shows that he is improving a little bit because it's these kind of finishes when he has time to think that sometimes. He kind of screws up. I can remember there was a 1v1 last year versus Arsenal, in a really big game. I think when Liverpool had made it 2-1 or maybe even 2-2, and he had a chance to do something over the keeper. I think it was 2-1. It was before Trent was able to help get that second. Uh, and Ramsdale came out. Ramsdale was amazing in that game, from what I remember. But he had that 1v1, and he wasn't able to lift it. He tried to actually just go low, and it didn't work. So lifting it was excellent. And then Alexis McAllister gets the second. Gravenberch plays a role here. So to be fair to him, they I think it's Endo that wins the ball, and then Gravenberch does really well to kind of shield it, and then he's able to find Salah, and then Salah, who has come on for Jota at this point, and Salah plays a great ball into the box that McAllister just is able to get a first great touch, and that kind of sets him up to fool the defender, and then he's able to finish. And then Salah with uh, this is more kind of on Brentford being bad than necessarily Salah being great, but both work out. Just it's kind of a long ball that Brentford can't really deal with. I think maybe it's even a Gakpo kind of a flick on header, and it's either Ben Mee or Collins that's really late to react. I think it's even both. And Salah is able to get 1v1. I think Collins is back there for the 1v1, and Salah just kind of takes him onto the left side. keeps his body between the ball, so Collins can't really bring him down, and then Salah's able to squeeze it between or past Flecken with his left foot to the left from the left side of the box, and then there was a moment, for Brentford to wake up. First, it looked like they possibly had a PK. Robinson didn't necessarily have the best couple of 5 minutes. He was great in the game, but he had a 5 minutes of just, losing his head a little bit, and it allowed Tony for the Tony goal. What happens is Robinson actually leaves to go press someone, and he misses. Brentford able to play around him, so that you don't have the fullback anymore. That kind of forces Konate to move over. That forces Van Dijk to kind of shift over, and Brentford are able to basically get Wisa running in behind both Konate and Van Dijk. Van Dijk's out of the play. Konate has to go and slides, and he misses. And then Wise is able to square it into the box, and I think it finds Reguilon. Reguilon has a great hit. It's saved by Kelleher, and then Tony's there for the rebound. It was a great save by Kelleher, so that was at least positive. And then all that fun for Brentford kind of ended with Cody Gakpo kind of doing an exclamation point on the game, and it really is a similar situation. Just a long ball. Luis Diaz is able to run onto it. I think another case of Ben Mee and Collins kind of being asleep at the wheel, or Ayer being asleep at the wheel, and I think Luis Diaz is able to play the ball behind someone. It might be Ayer's foot. Finds Cody Gakpo. Cody Gakpo is 1v1 with the keeper and is able to slot it past him. So the leading off stories into this, there are a lot of injuries that are really starting to catch up. So there was no Allison last week for flu. This week he had a hamstring injury. And then so Kelleher was great last week for Spurley, so that was positive, and he had to play. He was going to play in the Carabao Cup anyways, coming up. So these are at least pretty good reps. But he had struggled a little bit before this. But sometimes that can happen. Sometimes it's hard to find consistency when you're only playing just once every few weeks or so. So there could be some of that. And then Brentford are one of the more physical sides in the league, and they did have a good win coming off beating Wolves. So I was worried coming into this. It was the early game as well, as I mentioned, and with Liverpool starting lineup, Bradley was picked and able to start, which was big. And then Endo back has meant McAllister has been able to play a little bit more advanced role in moments, and we saw that kind of pan out as well. I mean, with Brentford, probably the big story was no Ethan Pinnock. And man, was that a bigger blow than maybe people who were thinking, given the way how Liverpool scored their goals in the second half. Just Brentford's back line was just, I mean, Ayer usually doesn't really play in the center back role, even given he's like 6'6". But it seems he's more usually used as either a wide center back or even a wing back. He was played in the middle, and he was getting caught out a few times, and so Brentford didn't start bad. A couple early chances for them. There was a Yanelt that had a shot wide, and I think Malpai had a 1v1 with Konate, but he had to stop. He didn't feel he could take him on. Embremo maybe does. So this is one case where maybe missing Embremo showed up. There was a beautiful Bradley kind of dribble, and it forced a good Flecken save. Flecken started the game off quite well, and there was a decent Tony chance in the 14th minute. The shot just bobbled wide, but this is a pretty good chance. Pretty good link up play with with Malpai. So the funny thing about him is, while he doesn't really have pace to necessarily get in behind in the box, he's clever and quite annoying. And Tony and him have pretty good connection in when they're inside the final third. It's just kind of the way, how do you advance in that situation? So it's possible with Wisa back, we might actually see Wisa start versus Man City, given how we saw Chelsea able to kind of strike, being directness, because Brentford were not able to be direct versus Liverpool, and that really did hurt them. Because in the 20th minute there was also a Tony breakaway, but Konate did well to run back and stop him with that. So Konate was able to just kind of handle Brentford just by himself. Brentford were able to get behind him in a way that was different, because this game a year ago, uh, one actually, it was back in January. Yeah, so I guess it was a year ago. Brentford beat Liverpool. I think it was like 3-1, and Embremo was just a man amongst men. Yeah, there we go. Embremo was just unplayable that game. I don't even think they had Tony that game. Just Embremo had the pace to really trouble them. I think Van Dijk even ruined his hamstring trying to beat Mbemo into a sprint. And so things weren't necessarily going great. It was quite both teams were kind of just waiting out the game a little bit. I was wondering if their high fullbacks versus or Liverpool's high fullbacks with Robinson and Bradley versus their wingbacks, could there be a chance where maybe Liverpool lost the ball and they were able to maybe get Reguilon a ball over the top to maybe force Konate to run out. I was curious if that was going to be an issue. Another note I had was was passing the ball well to start, and then really the game kind of changed on two moves. So first, Curtis Jones has to come off, and basically, I was really, fretting this because one, he's been their second most important midfielder in the season. And people speak about Klopp having his injury room back. It's because of Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones covers so much ground. It's him and Szoboszlai that basically cover the most distance in the team now. And no Szoboszlai, and now no Curtis Jones. And I was just really worried because Gravenberch coming in. He was poor versus Arsenal. Brentford on one of the more physical sides, and for the most part, it seemed Gravenberch has struggled with the physicality in the league, and I was legitimately cringing when this happened. And then Jota went down later, but before that, Liverpool do get their first goal, and it's important too that they got the first goal because it forced Brentford to come out a little bit out of their shell. Otherwise, Brentford would have been staying back, forced Liverpool to break them down, and then they would have been trying to counter. And Liverpool getting that first goal, that kind of changed how Brentford were setting up. So that was important. Uh, and unfortunately for Brentford, this is not a good goal to give away. Brentford have a free kick here, and basically Liverpool just clear it. I think Van Dijk is just booting it away, and Jota is there, and he draws the Reguilon onto him. Jota beats Reguilon in the air. He has a beautiful header, and Nunez is kind of behind the ball, and he's able to just run on. He's completely free on goal, and he has all the time in the world to kind of think of what he wants to do. Maybe he can try to go past Flecken, but he just decides to lift it, and he floats it. Flecken can't get anywhere near it. This is such a good goal. And a note I had is he couldn't do this last year, in my opinion. So I think it shows he is improving a little bit, and he has gotten a lot of stick this year, but he has legitimately improved. His numbers aren't bad at all, to say the least. He's got a lot of assists, which I didn't know. He's got double-digit assists, as well with, double-digit goals, and again, we still have maybe 12 games left to go in the season. And then Jota went down, and then this was when I was starting to cry a little bit considering how important he's been. It's a freak accident. Norgard just lands on his knee, and I guess it kind of twists a little bit somewhere. I mean, there was a lot of fears that it was going to be another ACL, uh, which didn't feel right. I mean, just kind of it must have been a twist when he landed because you figured an impact wouldn't necessarily do that, but he had to get that air cast. He had to get stretchered off, which was a problem as well. And it didn't necessarily factor in this game, but it could later on. Jota is one of those players. Sometimes Liverpool's front three get into a situation where no one really wants to take the shot on. Sometimes he can have games where Salah doesn't have his shooting boots, and sometimes those games where Nunez doesn't have his shooting boots. I can think back to like Newcastle. Liverpool had like 30 shots in that game, and it took Jota to come on to make the right pass, to make the right decision in the final third for Liverpool to finally start scoring again. So sometimes it just takes a different mindset, or not just a mindset. Sometimes it takes just an ability to get a shot on goal, and Jota does that. Jota gets goals when you don't really expect them to happen, and they come in big moments. And missing him again is going to be massive. Uh, and so that's where we are. And then we get to the second half. So Gakpo has to come on for Darwin Núñez. This is another kind of a surprise that was happening. I was wondering if maybe Klopp did this because he wanted to, maybe Núñez was on a minutes restriction anyways, and he didn't think he could wait it out. It was also good to use this at halftime. That way, he didn't have to burn another window of subs because he had already used two. So I think that was possibly in his thinking as well. But it turns out maybe Núñez did have a little bit more, was feeling it a little bit more than we thought because Núñez versus back lines just freaks him out. It was only a 1-0 game still, so I was worried about this. But Liverpool do start the second half well. It helped out that Burnley that they had that first goal because again it forced Brentford to come out a little bit, and what that meant is, Liverpool had to deal with some pressure, but Endo was helping out with that. So a note I had here was he was finding really good ways to quickly play the ball to teammates when teammates were making clever runs. So there's a decent chance here that starts with him under pressure, and he picks out Gravenberch. Gravenberch does well to receive the ball and successfully holds off a defender on his shoulder, returns the ball back to Endo, and then one times to Diaz to make it a run, slip run in behind. Diaz has a run at the back line and then tries to play in Gakpo in the box. Gakpo slips, but this is a pretty good sign of intent. And then there's a chance for Diaz. The shot just flies over, but the passing is very good here. Endo runs into a pocket no one is marking, gets the ball, turns, quickly plays it to McAllister ahead of him. He then turns, finds Diaz, and Diaz beats basically three Brentford players, sticking his weak legs out, trying to get the ball off him, only for the shot to just miss. This was a very good a moment for Diaz, which is because sometimes it doesn't feel like he does this enough. I don't necessarily know if maybe he's starting to trust his body more, which is definitely a big bonus for Liverpool if that is the case. Because uh, uh, missing Jota, you're going to need someone to add with those goals. So Diaz has started to actually do that. To be fair to him. And so, and then we have a big chance for Salah. It's his first 1v1. But it's an early warning sign here because Brentford have not started the half well. So it's just a simple Van Dijk header that clears over everyone. Salah is first to a loose ball. He's 1v1 with the keeper, and he can't even get the shot on target. This could be a sign of rust, but I was thinking it was more Salah didn't want to actually fully try his hamstring on this. But in this 2 minutes later, he has another chance too, and it's Gakpo to Salah with a Jensen block. So a second warning sign for Brentford. Salah wins a 50-50 duel, and then he has a whole field to kind of run or carry into. I said sprint. I don't necessarily know if it's sprint. Brentford are lost at the back again, and Salah has options to play basically one to his right, or Gakpo or Saka. Salah decides to play the one to his right. He also had Diaz. Gakpo then tries a return ball to Salah, and Salah can't get to the ball before Jensen. Jensen has a very good block here because I think this is probably a goal. Uh, so Brentford are pressing higher, and that is forcing their back line to play higher. And Liverpool were enjoying that because Brentford's back line, Ben Mee, Collins, and Ayer were not doing well. And another thing that was happening was Ayer was getting caught out of position. So that doesn't happen for the second goal. It may happen for the third. So the second goal with McAllister, Flecken is receiving a pass back. And Gakpo does well first to get pressure on him, and then Flecken decides to boot the ball away. So it shouldn't be that big a deal. Endo wins the first header, and Endo's like sneakily good at winning headers. Gravenberch then does very well to keep the ball, uses his body to shield it, so good. I've been wanting him to be a little bit more physical. He's 6'2". He should not be pushed off the ball the way he has been in some of these games. So this was really good to see. And then he does well to actually pick out Salah. As well. And then Salah has a wonderful vision to play this pass, and he threads it through into the box, and then McAllister has just a fantastic touch to take it, and the first touch basically fools Ayer and then sets him up to have a shot and gets it past Flecken with ease. And then another thing that was interesting was this was really the first time we got to see Connor Bradley with Mo Salah, playing at the same time. And the interesting thing was when Salah was going out to kind of be on the touchline, Connor Bradley was starting to invert, play a little bit more centrally. And I didn't know he could necessarily do that. And this adds another dimension to his game because I thought he was actually quite good at doing this. He even had, I don't know if I necessarily have the chance, but he had a fantastic kind of dribble in the second half when he was able to get the ball in the middle of the field, carried it and even tried a shot. So he was showing to play in the middle, you have to be able to turn on the ball and collect it quickly, and it's not as easy to do that as it is to kind of receive the ball on the touchline. That's why it's not as easy for players to sometimes do that switch. And then Brentford made a couple subs. They made some changes. So he brought on Wisa, Onyeka, who they've missed for AFCON, and Lewis Potter. Uh, and Brentford were better after those changes. It is worth saying that. But even before that, there was a great chance for Liverpool. I think it's Salah to Diaz, but this was blocked. So Endo helps create the turnover. Reguilon has to get rid of the ball, passes it to Van Dijk. Liverpool quickly move upfield. Gravenberch is on the ball and plays a really nice threaded ball into the box that finds Salah, and he has a one-time layoff to Diaz, and it's blocked. But this is really quick football. This is great to see because sometimes the front three isn't always it's kind of static. Sometimes when people get when their attackers get the ball, their first thought is to just try to look for goal themselves. There is a lot of unselfishness in this, and it's funny. I said sometimes you just want someone to shoot it. In this case, I liked the idea that everyone was thinking quickly. If the ball is moving quickly, maybe it doesn't come off, but I like that. That's how you can kind of try to beat through a low block or beat through a packed in box if you can move the ball quickly where they aren't able to shift over and recover. Uh, and it was the second time that Gravenberch had played a really nice through ball. He did it to pick out Robinson a couple minutes before, and another I had was Diaz was starting to be a little bit unplayable. So that was positive. And then we get to the third goal, and it comes in the 68th minute. And this kind of you felt like this maybe killed the game off, and then Brentford were able to come back, but uh, there's a goal kick, and Kelleher goes long. Gakpo challenges the header and gets it to go backwards. Binmi is really slow to react, but Ayer has followed Gakpo. And when Gakpo is able to get the flick header on, basically Ayer is out of the picture. And then Salah just has to beat Nathan Collins and Binmi. And even with a bad hamstring, he's going to win that race. And then he's able to run through. Basically takes on Nathan Collins and basically beats him as well, and he's able to slot it in with his left foot. And then things got a little dicey. Robinson gets lucky not to have a penalty called on him, but it doesn't really matter because Brentford score anyways. But it's also Robinson kind of making a mistake. So as I mentioned, uh, he flies. So what he does is Robinson sprints to win the ball back, and he goes up high upfield and doesn't get there, and that opens Liverpool up. Brentford's Onyeka actually is very good here. So he gets the ball, and at first he does like a little quick 1-2 with someone on the touchline to get it, and that basically takes another player out. And then Onyeka sees that Wisa is able to kind of get he's behind Van Dijk, and he's able to get Kanate the ball, and he plays a nice ball for Riza to run onto. And then Kanate is able to get there, and then Reguilon gets it, and he has a great hit. That's saved, but the rebound falls to Tony, and Tony puts it away. So it wasn't that few minutes where Robinson wasn't necessarily great. There was a moment in the 80th minute when Damsgaard was able to get the ball in space. I think it's Damsgaard that actually has the return ball. So for that goal, and Damsgaard coming on as a sub was fairly good, or quite good. To be fair, so there's a moment in the 80th minute where Damsgaard's able to get the ball in space. He turns and he has Tony trying to split Van Dijk and Kanate. If this ball is on, I think it actually does reach him. But Kanate reads it and is able to cut it off. So a very, very good play, but by both Kanate and Damsgaard. If Damsgaard can maybe hit this a little harder, I do think Tony's going to be able to maybe at least challenge Van Dijk to a sprint. Uh, but Damsgaard was bright. The few times Liverpool were trying to press him, he was finding ways to find open teammates, and that's positive to see as well. And then Brentford maybe feel they were unlucky to not have PK called with Robinson. It doesn't really matter because they scored a couple minutes later, but a couple minutes after that, Nathan Collins basically took Luis Diaz down and caught him. And even in the first half, I thought basically Jota was tackled. So like football tackled. So I feel like that cancels each other out, and then Liverpool get the fourth in the 85th minute. It's just a Brentford throw-in, and Gomez is able to just wins it. He has a loop ball upfield. There's no real thought to this. It's just kind of clearing it a little bit, and Ayer misses the ball entirely trying to kick it away, and then Luis Diaz runs onto it, squares it to Gakpo, making a run on the left channel, and then basically the ball gets past Nathan Collins, and then Gakpo just has Flecken to finish, and he does. And then Kelleher had a good save late. There was a chance, Brentford free kick and a very good reactive save and finish here. And he had a pretty good game, all things considered. So that was positive. But the note really was they missed Panic massively, because maybe they could have used Ayer somewhere else on the field. And two, I just don't think Panic would have been beaten in a couple of those goals that they gave away. I mean, it was a bittersweet kind of victory. The injuries were costly, and it was nice to see Nunez score that wonderful goal, but he was taken off, and but the next man up mentality kind of showed again. Saka back to help as well, but Gravenberch was big and Gakpo as well in the second half. So the key shots, both 15 apiece, 6 shots on target for Brentford, 8 for Liverpool. 15 is kind of low. Usually that number is higher, but again, Darwin Núñez was only able to play for one half. 8 targets though on Liverpool, I think, is positive. Uh, Bedford with 248, 69%, not the best passing. Liverpool with 583. Brentford didn't really know what their game plan was. It seemed like they were kind of in a mix between trying to go long and trying to counter, but they didn't necessarily have the pace to do that. And the other thing too was they didn't necessarily know if they should sit back or try to press. And when you're kind of caught in between, that's not usually a great spot to be in. Uh, this was big, though. I mean, this was one of the more physical teams in the league, and to do it without Allison, I mean, I was worried about that. Now they do have Luton Town, coming up, and they're kind of the same way. So still a little bit worried not having Allison and with Kelleher, but um, I mean, some of the tactics was interesting. So I did think it was interesting to see Bradley and Salah for the first time because you did see Bradley and Vert. I didn't necessarily know if he could do that. Bradley and Robinson, though, the way the both fullbacks were used, at least in that first half, it was kind of what I have here is it's an example of how Klopp kind of sees the fullback position differently than Pep, and so these are attacking outlets to give you an extra man to unlock things, not just defend wingers 1v1. And Pep, for some reason, doesn't really like doing this. He wants them to kind of be defensive minded first. But I mean, the power for both to bomb forward and the skill to collect the ball in pockets and get crosses off. I thought it was really fun watching, and it was also really good to see Connor Bradley again. And then Endo's role was really key. So he offered McAllister to be a little more advanced, but not just that. He's good at understanding, when to commit a tactical foul. He's sneaky good at collecting the ball and threading passes between lines, and he knows where to play passes in those kind of 50-50 scrums. There'll be times when like the ball is just kind of bouncing, there are a lot of bodies away, and he'll like just boot it away, and it looks like he's just trying to clear it. But more times than not, it's finding someone. And it's not just that can't just be a coincidence. He seems to know what he's wanting to do, and he's able to make quick decisions. Uh, so I mean, 14 final third passes as well, and he's a beast in the air. Basically two of Liverpool's goals came from him winning a 50-50 ball first. I think he wins the first header on the first goal. It's him winning a header at Brentford to do a free kick, and then it's Van Dijk doing the clearance. So, um, and then there are a couple moments here where Liverpool's shape can change with him, and so he's not really going to leave that position to run forward. And so what happens sometimes is Liverpool's defensive line. So you'll have Kanate and Virgil kind of go wide, and he'll come back and form the kind of almost a makeshift three. And you're playing a high line. That's how you can do that. Um, and he's really good at being a holding cover. Now maybe he doesn't have necessarily the pace, so if it's only him in the middle and he's isolated, then you can maybe get him. But usually when he's around, when he's kind of in the middle of the field, Kanate or someone else is close to him as well. Usually Liverpool have, or maybe it's Curtis Jones. Liverpool have someone next to him to help him out with that. So you're not going to have Curtis Jones now. So can Gravenberch recognize that needs to be his role now as well? That'll be something we have to see. If I would be someone scouting Liverpool as far as their deficiencies, I would probably look at that. If you're not going to have Curtis Jones, maybe you can get to Endo now without that kind of protection. Uh, Maybe you can find a way to get Kanate to come at you. Maybe you can get Robinson to kind of press. You miss him, ball over the top, and maybe try to go at Van Dijk in that situation. Force Van Dijk to go wide, not necessarily to go through the middle. But we'll have to see if Chelsea are able to do that. They do have maybe a piece that they didn't have in that 4-0 game at Anfield, and that is Nicholas Jackson. Nicholas Jackson made Chelsea a little different versus Man City when we get to that. And then, with Endo, it's he had a good run of games before after McAllister got injured, and they lost him for Asia Cup, and now it's basically the first time that we're seeing McAllister and Endo both together, which is interesting. It's taken a while for it to happen, but at least so far it's been pretty good. And then a couple positives. I had Luis Diaz was quite good in the second half, taking players on, doing well to dribble, making runs past people on the shoulder. I thought he was taking more risk again, so I thought all of that was positive. Uh, Salah really did step up, but so did Gravenberch and Gakpo. And again, I didn't necessarily know if Salah was all 100% fit, but good enough for a goal and assist. And then a note I have here is Virgil van Dijk's passing. It's easy to overlook this, but it is key to how everything else functions in the team, and he's just really good at threading passes himself. He's quite good at finding a way to get maybe Gravenberch or get into the ball, and then maybe make them kind of do stuff. And if not, the switch to Salah is usually on. Maybe the switch to Diaz. He's quite good at just kind of spreading the ball around, and maybe he's not maybe he's a little unknown or unnoticed for that. And Kanate was able to handle both Tony and Malpai together. So really, the only thing was the injuries. No Jota and Curtis Jones, and Nunez was brilliant, but he also had to come off. So a kind of a note I had is the whole season has been a theme of people kind of stepping up when others have gone down, and so Simikas and Guns and Joe Gomez for Robertson, and Kwanzaa for Matip. The midfield hasn't had Thiago all season. Kelleher for Allison. Jota and Diaz kind of manned the fort when Salah missed. And so can they now do that with Jota? Can Cade Gordon get some Europa minutes now? Can Slabberslide maybe do a job higher up when he returns? Maybe not necessarily have him in midfield. Maybe have him further up. Or maybe it'll be the idea will be Elliott. Can Gakpo start to find a net with a good run of games? And maybe it could be Nunez. The finish did feel different. If Nunez can get to a chance where he's not necessarily rushing finishes, given the amount of chance that he gets a game, I mean that basically would be it as well. It could be Salah. Salah is back, but I was a little worried that he may you don't want someone to rush from a hamstring injury. Now, it was out of desperation, but again, it's scarily similar to what happened with Olise. And any kind of setback, and he'll be out for months, not just weeks. So, uh, and then the midfield is kind of low at the moment, with Curtis Jones being out and Sloboshai and Thiago. And so you might see names like Barbie Clark and TJ McConnell having to play until some of those midfielders get healthy. Maybe not necessarily versus Luton Town, but they have an FA Cup game coming up. Maybe you'll see them versus Southampton. Uh, and then with Brentford, and that's not necessarily to say that they're taking the Southampton game lightly, because Southampton are actually in a quite a good run of form now, and Southampton tied them 4-4 with basically the same team they had last season. So and then with Brentford, I just think they didn't necessarily have the pace to trouble Liverpool like they had in the past. So and Bremer's missed hurt when they had Weiser back, that changed. So I'm curious if we do see Weiser maybe get the start versus Man City. And then Penford definitely be an act. I did like a Gamsguard appearance, so I put a note down for them. And just defensively, that was as bad as I think they've been this season. Just no chemistry with that center back three, and so that kind of goes back to the Pinnock issue. And then I will move on to Man City and Chelsea, and this game ends 1-1. It could have been a lot worse. But to be honest, until the Rodri goal happened, maybe you thought City were actually going to pull it off. So they get the first goal with Sterling, and then Rodri, of course, basically their player of the season. And if City wins silverware, I'm curious if he doesn't get Ballon d'Or recognition. City have not lost when he's played, going back over a year, at least a competitive game. My brother mentioned something about the cup game, the Community Shield. I don't, yeah. As far as like an official kind of game, he's gone over a month or over a year not losing. So and it continues, and they continue because of him. So leading off story is Holland was the hero versus Everton, and it didn't really factor much in the Champions League game. But he lost his grandmother in the midweek, and for some reason that hasn't really uh, gotten attention. That hasn't really been said a lot in a lot of the post takes that I've seen. And we don't necessarily know how close he was to his grandmother or not, but that can be heavy if he was close to her. And it's possible he went into this week a little bit distracted, to be honest. And given how he played in this game, and it hasn't necessarily been the way he's played in the past, because he did have a couple big chances. Now, for the most part, the big chances came with his head. And to be fair, maybe the one criticism you can say is he's not the best in the air. Even though he's 6'4", weirdly enough, if you watch more times than not, if he can try to fling his foot in the air instead of his head, he'll do that. Uh, and I don't think it's necessarily because he likes being, he likes karate kicking in the air. I just think that's kind of that's just what he is. He feels like he's 5'10", not necessarily 6'4". So I think it was maybe the case of that, but either way, the main headline of the game was that him having the missed chances. But I thought the main headline coming into this was going to be Cole Palmer returning, to maybe haunt Pep and his former club, and it turned out to be a different player that returned and haunted Pep to haunt his former club in Raheem Sterling. And it's the second time in a row because Sterling scored in the fixture in November as well. And another kind of minor storyline coming into this was it was a game without Thiago Silva, and I am curious if my theory panned out, if that they are better, at least versus the high-end teams, without Thiago Silva. I thought Diazy and Colwell were incredible. They're much more aggressive. I thought they were trying to play a higher line. I thought they were better closing down gaps in the box, better at everything, to be honest. And they were both immense. I think I saw Diazy had something like 13 or 16 clearances. But both were quite good at winning duels in the air. Now that said, Holland did have his chances. So this could have still, been kind of a 2-1 kind of game. Chelsea were played out of the park a little bit in the second half, but that was a little bit of their own doing. I think they just I think their legs got tired. Uh, but they went into this with a very interesting strategy. They were basically saying, we'll allow City to have the ball a little bit. We're not necessarily going to press them that much. But what we are going to do is we are going to mark them high and make it really annoying to try to get the ball to Rodri and Foden and Kevin De Bruyne. And basically, it seemed like they recognized how City were going to line up in their build up, and they targeted basically Akanji, in my opinion, Akanji in the midfield, and also I think they targeted Alvarez. They wanted him to get the ball. And maybe the one maybe kind of sitter or player that was able to handle the beginning was Doku. Doku was getting the ball a lot, but it seemed like, to be honest, Malo Gusto was able to take him on. And on the flip side, I thought Chilwell was able to take on Phil Foden. And so that was big because the fact that Chelsea saw that it happened early too. Chelsea saw that basically Gusto and Chilwell could handle those two outlets on the wing by themselves. Now maybe you had Caicedo or you had Cole Palmer kind of helping out, even Enzo in some cases, helping out in spots, but you didn't have Diaz and Colwell having to run out to help them out. So basically Diaz or Diazy and Colwell kind of recognized they had a little assignment. Do not let Holland get the ball. Anytime that he was kind of near the box, have a body on him at all times. So that was important. And I think another thing that was interesting with Chelsea is finally they lined up with Caicedo and Enzo as the two, and then Conor Gallagher in front of them. And the reason why I say that is a lot of this season, we've seen Pochettino do kind of crazy things. We've seen Gallagher play further back, maybe because Gallagher has better legs. I don't know. And it's been Enzo more often than not in that 10 role. And that's never really suited Enzo Fernandez. And for the most part, earlier in this season, we've seen Diazy play at right back in a number of games, and we've seen Levy Colwell play at left back in a number of games to kind of fit in Thiago Silva. And for the most part, I thought finally Pochettino relatively got this lineup right. Another thing too was he had Jackson, and I was wondering maybe try Cuckoo, but Jackson really worked out because one, his hold of play was quite good in a way that I wasn't really expecting. He was making runs in the channels, so he was causing hell that way as well. And we saw Sterling play over say maybe a Mudrick, and man, did that decision work out well as well. Sterling doesn't always play in a lot of these games, and so coming into this, there was an early chance for Alvarez, but maybe a theme of the game is Man City poached the ball early off a Caicedo pass. It's maybe like the one time that Caicedo didn't necessarily have the best pass, but Holland gets ball to De Bruyne, lays it off to Alvarez, and Alvarez lashes it. The shot goes wide, and that was kind of the theme. City had a lot of chances, but not of a lot of shots were on target. I don't really remember the keeper having to make a lot of big saves. But this is kind of what I was speaking about earlier. So, some of the Chelsea tactics in the first 5 minutes, you have Gallagher further ahead, and they're basically using him to shadow Rodri and Akanji. Chelsea are setting up for Akanji to be the main guy on the ball as their pressing trigger, and they're marking everyone basically but him. Another thing that's happening is Gusto can handle Doku, and Chilwell can handle Foden, and Chelsea are basically marking. They're marking people, but they're not necessarily pressing high. And another thing too is they have Colwell and Diazy tight on Holland near the halfway line. And again, I don't think this is something they could have done with Thiago Silva. Uh, there's an early chance for Chelsea in the 5th minute. Gallagher cross to no one, but it's an early sign though. Enzo makes a really quick decision in the final third. City are kind of having trouble with Palmer and Gusto running on the touchline together, and Jackson is doing well to be an outlet to receive the ball under pressure and play teammates on the break. And then in the 11th minute, this first Holland miss, I think he had like three of them. So maybe the three in the game as well. And here, the one thing to say is, I mentioned how maybe his heading isn't always necessarily his strength. Doku finally has options ahead of him. One of the few times too, because Doku was getting isolated, but here he had Alvarez to kind of play a ball to. It's one of the few times when Alvarez was able to get involved because Alvarez didn't necessarily have his best game. He makes a good run, and then Alvarez has a nice cross that finds Holland, and he just puts it over the crossbar. And then there's an Ederson mistake. Jackson pokes it off him. Gallagher then threads a ball to Cole Palmer. This is maybe going to be a goal, but it's blocked by Ake. So good defense there. And then we start to have the Chelsea chances. First one for Jackson. This is a big chance, too. I was screaming when this didn't go in. So Palmer wins the ball off Doku, and Ake is caught in no man's land. Gusto sprints down the wing unmarked. Diaz can't recover in time and is exposed a bit. I thought Ruben Diaz was exposed a little bit in this game. Palmer plays it to Gusto with a great ball and great weight. And then Gusto has Jackson for a square ball on the breakaway. The ball maybe isn't played the best, because Jackson has to slow down. But Jackson's first touch also lets him down, and Ederson's able to come out. Ederson actually is good, so maybe this is more on Ederson being quite good than Jackson. But this was a monster chance, and then there was a chance with Sterling, and it's also kind of a 1v1 after Ederson messed up. So Jackson is well offsides in the beginning, but he comes toward the ball. Sterling is making a back shoulder kind of run, and it confuses the City back line. Enzo floats a great ball here, and then Sterling just 1v1, and he can't finish. Uh, Ederson did mess up. Sterling messes up. Ederson has another good save. Uh, and I was wondering if it was going to be a bit one of those days, and then they finally get the breakthrough with Sterling a couple minutes later, and we get the go ahead goal, and it's fitting because one, it's Sterling of all people to come back and haunt Man City and Pep, but two, it's set up by Jackson, and he has been getting some stick from commentators, but he had a lovely flick on here to set the whole thing up. So Jackson has a flick to Cole Palmer, and then turns upfield. Palmer then plays him the ball to run onto, and Ruben Diaz again is outdone by Jackson's back to goal kind of move, and then he turns, and then basically when it looks like Akanji is there to make a recovery run in time to close off Jackson, Kyle Walker decides to do the same thing. He makes the same run to go to Jackson, leaving Sterling. Sterling's completely left alone, and Jackson does well to see Sterling and plays him a good angled square ball to find Sterling in the box, and then by the time Kyle Walker is able to sprint back, because he has to sprint as hard as he can, when Sterling's able to cut back and chop back, Kyle Walker can't necessarily put on the brakes nearly in time, and Ederson's coming at him, and then Sterling's able to curl it past him, and what a goal! And it felt like it could have been more. Outside of that Holland chance, it felt like maybe Chelsea were all over them. And things did change though in the second half. I think the problem to be played like this is you're going to maybe get those chances. This kind of being a Liverpool fan with Klopp over the years is, as I've seen this in some of the big games, is you can start off flying, but you can only make so many sprints ahead. And if if those don't necessarily convert to goals, eventually those legs are going to tire, and you're not necessarily going to be able to play that way again for a full 90 minutes. I think we maybe saw a little of that in the second half. So, and then there was an early controversy for City that's Kyle Walker kind of brought down. I'm kind of in between here. It does feel like Sterling does bring him down, but I think one of the things to talk about is it's one of the few times that Foden is able to do. He basically does an underlap, so he runs basically to the ball, and he's running to Kevin De Bruyne, and that basically brings Chilwell along with him. It's one of the few times they were able to get Chilwell to kind of catch a little bit. And what that means is that leaves Walker kind of to make a run that's a little bit unmarked. and it's Sterling's guy, and he is maybe lucky to be a second late to react, and I do think it's possible that this could have been given. Unlucky there. And then there's a chance for Holland on a Foden cross. Better from City. Started out defending versus Chelsea attack, and then they quickly break up field in numbers. Kevin De Bruyne plays the ball to Foden. Foden then has Holland in his sights. He plays a good cross to the back post, but Holland can't get his redirected effort to his leg to a leg flying out. Uh, and then there's maybe the biggest chance in the second half for Chelsea to maybe kill this off. So Palmer first nutmegs Alvarez. Alvarez again being played in midfield. It's probably not his best preferred position, and there are a couple times when he does struggle, especially without possession. And here it was kind of a good example of that. If Kovacic is playing, I don't necessarily think this happens. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Palmer then has Gusto making a run up the wing, and then Gusto then sends a terrific delivery into the box that Sterling's able to reach, and Ederson has to make a real good reaction save. And Ederson has made some errors lately. He had one in the Champions League with Copenhagen, but he's also been really good with his saves and when he's needed to be, and he kept City into the game. And I think maybe and then you have a Rodri chance, and things are starting to be really compact, and there's not a lot of space into the box. City are starting to look for gaps, and Foden basically, I think, gives up playing it backwards to Rodri, joining in, but Rodri just misses. Enzo maybe puts just enough pressure to make him miss. But one thing that's happening now is maybe the reason why City didn't have a lot of shots on goal is they were getting into good areas, but a lot of their shots in the second half were being blocked by well-timed challenges by Chelsea. And so that was happening too. And I think maybe another case of maybe getting a note I have here is there's a lot of talk about how do you break through a packed-in box in situations like this, and so you can maybe get a break with a second ball bouncing your way. Maybe you win a contested header from a set piece. It requires maybe beating someone 1v1 in a tight space, or maybe you can draw PK. But a really good opportunity is cutback balls like this when you can have if you have your kind of a defensive midfielder who's never really going to be guarded. He's always going to be open, and the problem is so few people are actually able to hit from that kind of range. And Raji is one of those players, as we saw later on. So this was basically the warning sign that Rodri was going to be a little bit more dangerous in the second half. And then there's a chance for Holland. Great block by Diazy. Doku here has the better of Caicedo with a turn. Then he plays for something for Holland to run into. And when Holland is trying to wrap his foot on the ball, Diazy is there to kind of slide and deflects it. And he gets just enough for the keeper to make a reaction save. And then basically, let's see, end to end we go. So it was a big. Basically, I mentioned how there was probably the biggest chance for Sterling. This was a big chance as well within Nkunku. And Chelsea were having a lot of success kind of doing this. So what happens is they're playing the ball in the center, drawing Ake and Diaz both out towards the ball, only for Chelsea to quickly one-time it to on the wing. And then the idea is to draw basically Ake onto the ball and then play something in behind where Diaz can't make that recovery run. And I thought Chelsea were targeting Diaz in that kind of way. And I haven't seen the only time I've seen other teams do this was maybe Brentford a couple of weeks ago. So maybe you can get runners. If you can get Ake out of position, maybe you can get something at the top where Diaz can't necessarily recover. Maybe it's something other teams can look at. But one thing that's kind of funny to me is we've gotten to a situation where Gvardiol and Stones aren't necessarily playing, and so I would have kind of figured Ake would be the better of the defensive fullbacks. But in this case, he was gotten a few times. And anyways, Gallagher kind of makes a turn and gets to the loose ball. He has Nkunku for a square ball. And it's a similar move to the first goal. And then Nkunku messes up. He messes up his first touch, and he doesn't even get a chance off. So that was maybe Chelsea's basically last chance to kind of kill the game. And they're visibly exhausted. They're playing long stretches without the ball. It's requiring legs to move, make sprints all game, to counter all game. And basically, Pochettino starts to take off his sprinters. So he takes off Jackson for Nkunku, takes off Sterling for Chalobah, a center back, and takes off Cole Palmer for Cassidy, a defensive-minded midfielder. Very defensive-minded subs. But he did this in like the, 70th minute or so. A lot of time left, especially with some extra time. And once they did that, there was no way to progress the ball upfield and relieve some pressure. And basically, with 8 minutes to go, I understand doing this. But with 25, with only a 1-goal lead, It felt like Chelsea were sitting ducks, and they were taking wave after wave of pressure, and there was no way to advance it. There was no way to keep the ball, and all they were doing is just inviting City onto them even more. And basically, in the 75th minute, this is the Holland chance that everyone kind of gasped when he missed. So Kevin De Bruyne floats a really good ball into the box with his left foot, and Holland is all alone. He gets good contact, but the ball just kind of flies too high over the ground. And then in the 82nd minute, here is Rodri, and the bend don't break kind of approach was broken. So Bernardo Silva has since come on. I thought Man City were better when Bernardo Silva came on as well. That was a key sub. Uh, so he gets on, he runs onto a through ball from Kevin De Bruyne, and he floats a ball to the back post. It goes over Holland, but Chelsea can't clear it. Walker then runs onto a loose ball, lashes at a volley. The ball bounces around everywhere, and eventually Rodri just has a picture perfect hit, kind of like the Champions League, and he saves them. And again, Rodri's had like a year-long stretch from not losing with this team, but the goal really comes from the movement in the beginning from Bernardo Silva, who I think maybe should have come on even earlier than he did, but he just seems to recognize before anyone else where the gaps are in the field and how to exploit them. And he is an underrated player for them. Another thing to highlight is this move starts with a triangle of Doku, Ake, and Rodri all kind of passing it to one another. Not much is happening, and then Kevin De Bruyne gets onto the ball in open space, and the first thing he does is he's looking to play a ball into the box where someone can run onto it, and it's Bernardo Silva. So Pep's two unscheduled players kind of factored in here. And then yeah, there was calls for maybe a late PK. I do feel like it would have been harsh. Rodri kind of sees Bernardo Silva making a run out wide, plays it to him, swing ball into the box. Silva does so, and then Holland wins the first header, and the ball just kind of pops up, and the ball then lands on the arms of both Diaz and Colwell. Neither player knows what's going on. Colwell then moves his arm and kind of hits the ball again, but uh, I just it took a while to kind of look at too, which I don't really love. If you can't make a decision after the first like I don't know 10 seconds of looking at a video, it's not really conclusive. So I was glad it wasn't given, but it could have. We have seen those given this year. So kind of the first takeaways were when you play City, there are really two mindsets. If you're basically if you're setting up to have 20-ish% of the ball, sitting deeper, uh, you can't concede first, so that's important. And then two, you legit need to have pace in your attack because you have to strike up the field quickly, and that's not easy to do with Kyle Walker and Ake as your fullbacks. But it is possible to kind of be clever, and Chelsea were able to kind of get them out of position. And Chelsea get the first goal that allowed them to kind of play the rest of the game on their terms, and not and they were able to kind of sit back a little bit more and not have to worry about pressing City to turnovers in the second half. So that was key as well. And then while and they were able to try to get City on a break a couple of times, and there were doubts. Maybe the early chances were going to hurt them, come back and hurt them. But Holland also had some key misses as well, and everyone is human. And as mentioned, it's possible the grandmother news, did distract him. So we'll have to see how he's able to bounce back. It's not like he was bad. I'm in the Darwin Nunes category of getting chances is important. If you're not getting chances, I don't. Then I've got no use for you. Getting chances and missing, it's fine. They had 31 shots, only 5 on target. It wasn't just Holland. Everyone on City was poor, at least when it came to the actual finishing. So, but when I get to Man City as well, I think Pep also deserves a little blame too. What he did with his lineup was a bit weird. It's so strange how we saw how good they were versus Brentford. Now, they were also cut up in a little bit, but they were so good versus Brentford that we haven't seen Pep go back to a similar kind of lineup. And when I get to Man City, I'm gonna expand on that a little bit. So 31 shots, 5 on target, 9 shots and 6 for Chelsea. So they outshot them on target. And there really is a story, just 5 on target. 3 big chances apiece. Man City with 71% of the ball, Chelsea 29. Man City 637 passes, 91%. So that's kind of the key too. It's so hard to actually get the ball off Man City. Usually they can just pass around you and they get the legs to tire. When Chelsea were able to get that early goal in the first half, early-ish goal, I mean, it actually came like around halftime. That allowed Chelsea to have to, one, they can kind of sit back and the game was on their terms. And they didn't necessarily care when, say, Diaz and Ake or Diaz and Akanji or whoever, had the ball in build-up and they were just taking forever because they're like, well, we have the goal. We don't necessarily have to come to you. You have to come to us. And that meant things were a lot harder for them to find those passes, to find that build-up. And so that was all key. And so when I get to Man City, and I guess we'll get started with them, I did think the tactics were a bit off. So we saw Foden play in white wing. he I think the left wing actually suits him better, and, Doku is so good, but at the same time, it feels like City are forcing it to him way too often, and one of the things that was noticeable too is they don't have fullbacks to create mismatches or overloads. Kyle Walker can sometimes do that, but he's really more of a safety go to kind of sprint back and stop those transitions. Ake isn't that kind of player. And Ake is fantastic defensively, but this is a situation where Gusto was able to sell out on Doku, and there was never a threat with Ake being able to do kind of an overlap, or when Ake was in position, Chelsea didn't have to mark him. Caicedo was able, with a few times when maybe they were trying to double up on Doku, Caicedo was selling out to do that. They didn't care when Ake had the ball. They didn't care when Akanji had the ball, or Diaz. And when you're trying to when you're looking for numbers, when you have kind of a when you're looking for mismatches, they weren't really able to do that. The only way how City are going to get a mismatch in that situation is on corner kicks, where you have those towers that can maybe win some headers into the box. But other than that, that really is it. And City do have a width problem. Teams don't fear them when the ball's going to the touchline. Maybe when Holland's in, it's different, but Doku doesn't have the best cross on him. So Doku is trying to beat a man before doing anything. He's not trying to really get a cross off. So I think it's better for them to actually have maybe Phil Foden on the left and to have him basically float. And the thing that we saw with Brentford was it was Gvardiol played instead, and Gvardiol basically offers you some width on the wing. Now that said, you do expose yourself a little bit more at the back, so there's some give and take here. But the best City have looked in the last few weeks was Foden versus Brentford, and they do play Brentford today. So uh, does Pep actually go back to that? Because Foden, when he's played on the right wing, he's not able to be nearly as impactful, and maybe the idea could be playing Foden instead of Alvarez, because Alvarez through the middle in midfield isn't necessarily working either. That's kind of been an issue. So the midfield was clogged, and Alvarez, Akanji, Rodri was not doing it. So Bernardo Silva was kind of benched, and he didn't come on in the second half. I thought the City improved significantly when Bernardo came on. So that's another thing too. Kovacic was benched. I was a bit surprised about that. It would have been interesting to see Kovacic versus former team. Mateus Nunes was benched, but I actually think Mateus Nunes tried on the right wing. Maybe Foden inside would work a little better. I mean, we saw Nunes last week versus Everton. That didn't really work out. John Stones being benched again, maybe perhaps managing his minutes because John Stones played in the Champions League game. Rico Lewis is not being tried much. That's been a bit of a surprise as well. And back-to-back games, I think Pep has subbed off Alvarez early. I think he did it versus Everton as well. So it seems like he understands that. And then speaking of Stones, the back line without Stones, they don't progress the ball nearly quick enough, and it's all slow. It's and they're allowing teams to get their shape. And you've got Holland. You're not really trying to get the best of him, trying to get those transitions. So that opens the game up. And maybe Pep's just so terrified about that. So I can't say. Some positives. Kevin De Bruyne was good again. 8 key passes, still created 3 chances. I do have concerns though for Ruben Diaz, and it's weird because he was maybe people considered him maybe player of the season for them last season. But he was also playing with John Stones, so maybe it was a little bit more of what Stones was offering them. Um, but when you can get maybe Ake, when you can get someone where Ruben Diaz is isolated, it doesn't seem like he can track back like he used to. I don't necessarily know if injuries have gotten to him, but he seems to pace slower than what I remember him from. Um, and then, there are two ways to kind of look at this. And the blow chances, and they win the game instead. So it could be no big deal. But if they're up against maybe a strong deep block against an Inter or Atletico in Champions League, could this be a situation for them? Are there cracks maybe here? Or nothing? I mean, they still got 30 shots, but Chelsea had some chances for them as well, and so did Brentford. So, again, is this a problem with Ruben Diaz? And I think for the last time in my collection, one thing I want to say here is the 50-50 calls finally aren't really going City's way. A couple in this game. There was one with Allison and Liverpool in November. There was a call for Spurs that I remember. And then I think Chelsea, and actually there was a big call with Spurs when it looks like they were maybe even going to be having a chance to have Holland completely on a breakaway with the last kick of the game. And the referee actually blew it when it looked like City basically had a free 1v1. I think in the Chelsea first game, they had a couple 50-50s go against them. So Maybe there are a little some cracks. They showed some cracks at home. Losing at home, and they haven't looked necessarily as impenetrable as in the past. Uh, but well, we'll see what they do, how they follow up with Brentford, and I still think they'll be here at the end. But by doing this now, they had a chance to maybe overtake everyone in the table if they won their games in hand. Now, if they do that, I think they'd be 1 point behind Liverpool. So I do think it now means they're not controlling their fate now. I think I don't necessarily see them beating both Liverpool and Arsenal to end the stretch, but we'll have to see if they are able to do that. And then with Chelsea, their work rate out of possession was some of the best all season for them, starting with Jackson. And he really showed how he can help this team without even scoring. So similar to Nunez in that respect. There was a clear strategy of what they wanted to do, and more importantly, they pulled it off. And they looked to exploit City in behind using Sterling and Jackson and Malo Gusto. Gallagher, I think, ran maybe 12 miles, 14 miles over the entire game. Him and Jackson worked very hard to force City to build through Akanji in that first half, not through Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne. And I thought they did that by constantly kind of shattering both those players, leaving Akanji open on purpose. Another thing too is it probably was the right call to get for Man City to get rid of both Sterling and Cole Palmer. Maybe Sterling had a contract issue. Cole Palmer maybe prevents Foden from being able to play that 10 role in moments, but it came back to haunt them in this game because both were instrumental in everything positive Chelsea did in possession. And some of the Chelsea tactics were defend very narrow and just give the rings to Foden and Doku to do his outlets. Do whatever you want, just don't get beaten. The pressing structure was interesting because, again, they didn't care when Ederson, Diaz, Ake had the ball out wide. They had Gallagher and Jackson kind of, blocking off those passing lanes in the middle. And a note I had here was Pochettino was right in the first half, and I thought daft a little bit in the second half. So he took off Sterling and Jackson early to save some legs, but that killed any kind of chance to possibly win the game. And another thing, too, is they had zero way to relieve pressure advancing the ball. And then the thing to say, too, is the way that they set up was quite good. So Sterling and Jackson to make those runs, but also they had Gusto. And by Gusto being able to have the wing a little bit, to allow Gusto to have the wing when Chelsea were in possession, that allowed Palmer to float a little bit more in the half spaces because Palmer doesn't really like getting the ball on the touchline either. And you can allow Palmer to be a little more different and inventive. And I thought Enzo and Caicedo were good at making quick decisions. And then Diazy and Colwell were very good at closing off gaps and spaces. Got the blocks and clearances they needed to. Diazy had 16 clearances, which is quite mad. And one of the reasons why City had 30 shots and only 5 on target was a lot of those blocks. A lot of those were blocks. And then Chilwell and Gusto, both being able to pocket the outlets on wide. I thought Gusto did a fabulous job on Doku, and then he was also able to get up. And his runs forward in possession were just so big because, again, it allowed Cole Palmer to have that free roll. And Cole Palmer is kind of similar with Phil Foden in that respect, where you can play him on the right, but they're not going to enjoy it. They like floating and getting to the ball to their feet and turning. And Gusto being able to make those runs allowed Palmer to do that. And Nicholas Jackson's Kalinka play was key. And he didn't play his best with Crystal Palace, but no one did other than Conor Gallagher that game. So I was wondering, maybe when is Nkunku going to be able to play instead? And they didn't look nearly as good as they did with Jackson. And again, in that 4-0 game at Anfield recently, Chelsea played Cole Palmer as that false nine. They didn't have Jackson that day. They didn't have Jackson making these runs in behind. So if Chelsea do beat Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, I think Jackson will be player of the match. But we'll have to see. It could be Augusto will probably play a key role in that as well because it seems like they need to have him making those runs, and so can Liverpool maybe try to exploit that with a ball over the top on him? But it seems Gusto versus Luis Diaz 1v1 battle could be a big matchup as well. And then Sterling was key, obviously, and we'll see what they offer for the Carabao. And then I did go a little long for those two. Probably not going to spend as much time on Arsenal because I did that last week. Uh, Arsenal do go on to beat Burnley quite easily, 5-0. Odegaard, Saka, PK, and then Saka with a really good third goal, and then Trossard, and then Havertz. And Arsenal did set the bar really high last week, and I spoke about them really glowingly, so I was hoping I didn't set myself up. And then Burnley did give Liverpool a scare. So with Fofana and they're fighting relegation. What are they going to do? And I think they actually did relegate themselves. Uh, I don't necessarily want to touch on every single goal. I mean, for the first one, It starts with David Raya on the ball, and he plays it to Saliba out wide, then Saliba's under pressure, and he plays kind of a weak pass to no one. But the Burnley center back can't control it, and then he has a poor touch and passes back to him, like, basically no one. Havertz runs onto the loose ball, so this starts with Havertz. And then basically, Arsenal win. He gives it to Rice. Rice is able to carry the ball upfield. Then he plays it to Martinelli on the wing. Martinelli then crosses it into Odegaard, and then Odegaard basically takes the one touch and has a really nice finish. But one note I wanted to have is Trossard and Kai Havertz are making runs into the box when Martinelli has the ball, and that's bringing two players along with them. And the cross goes behind them to basically Odegaard, who is unmarked. So good disguised runs, maybe fool Burnley a little bit here. Uh, and then there's a chance for Trossard, really good chance that Saka kind of receiving the ball near the start of the final third. And then quickly plays the ball back to Odegaard, and then it's kind of Odegaard floats the ball into the box to find Havertz. Havertz has a heavy touch, but Saka is able to run onto to it, and I think a square ball to Trossard, and Trossard just kind of whiffs. But you kind of see how quickly Arsenal can. That connection is starting to work a little bit better. It doesn't necessarily show up here, but it showed up later on for a goal. But a similar move here for the PK. So it starts with Saka again getting the ball on the touchline, but he's not high upfield. He's around like the 35-yard area. And he finds Odegaard again, and Odegaard completely unmarked. He has time to pick his options, and he sees Kai Havertz in the penalty box, plays him the through pass, and then Havertz, again, doesn't have necessarily the best touch, but he's able to get it to Trossard anyways, and then Trossard takes the touch before getting clipped by Assignon. And then Saka's able to bury the PK. I mean, halftime was interesting. It was only 4-2 in shots. But the Arsenal weren't necessarily lights out. It was also raining. It was miserable. But it quickly didn't matter because within like 1 minute in the first half, Arsenal kind of killed the game. Uh, Burnley can't win any 50-50 ball. The ball is played to Havertz, who does well to control it, high off his chest, and then he finds Odegaard, and then Odegaard has a great turn to receive the ball, not lose it, and he feeds Saka all up to be kind of a 1v1. And then Saka applies the other magic, and he takes the defender on. He fakes like he's going to chop to his left foot, only to take a touch with his right, heading towards the byline before firing at a shot with his weaker right foot to roof the net. And this kind of action I wanted to see Saka doing early in the season that I didn't feel like he was. So because in November it didn't feel like he was fine. He was taking shots with his right foot. He was taking chances with his right foot. I thought he was predictable. And here he showed he can maybe play with both feet, and if he can do that, I think there's 8 more goals in him a season, a bit like Mo Salah in that respect. And it seems like Saka, I think, has a stronger right foot than Salah. So we need to maybe see if this is going to be a theme a little bit because everyone kind of figures Saka gets the ball, he wants to get onto his left foot. But if he can like fake it and then go down with his right and kind of rip things with his right, that makes him a whole different player. And then there was maybe kind of a talk that Odegaard was lucky to stay on the field. He had a bad challenge on Aaron Ramsey, and Ramsey had to get stretched off. And then Trossard missed a big chance a couple of times where Martinelli had some fun on the ground. Just another poor pass by Burnley kind of set this up, and then Trossard just couldn't put it away, but he put away the chance a couple minutes later, so it doesn't really matter. Burnley are trying to just wait out the game, and this is a headed clearance to no one. Arsenal win the ball. Thanks to Havertz winning at 50-50, Trossard then finds Odegaard, who sees the entire left side of the field open, and then Odegaard floats the ball to Kiawar, runs onto it, and Kiawar sends a cross into the box. Havertz can't get onto it, but sticks a leg out to keep the ball alive, and Trossard, kind of right next to him, swings his left foot to curl it into the corner past Trossard. Second week in the row, Trossard, basically, curls it past Trafford. And it's the second week in a row that he's had this kind of finish. And this time with the opposite foot as well. So last week with his right foot, this one with his left. And again, Havertz and Trossard have that role in the beginning of the move, so it's fitting it finishes with them. And then Havertz basically is able to get the fifth one. It comes from a Burnley throw-in. They throw it to him, and can't be offsides on any throw-in. And no one. Then Havertz is able to kind of nutmeg someone to get around the defender, and then he's able to finish the 1v1. So I thought that was fitting too, because Havertz had another good game, so he is able to finish it with a goal. Burnley were bad though. They couldn't lay a glove. They couldn't keep onto the ball. They couldn't pass it. They couldn't press Arsenal into mistakes. And likewise, or on the opposite end, Arsenal were able to anytime they didn't have the ball, were able to get it back within a couple of passes. Burnley just couldn't keep it. Burnley with 8 shots, none on target. Arsenal 16 and 7. Arsenal weren't necessarily lights out flying, at least attack wise, but they were quite good. 515 passes, 87% accuracy. Uh, I think the habits and Trossard switcheroo worked again, and Saka's positioning I thought was noticeable. So here I've got Odegaard and Saka are kind of getting back to their 2000 or their 2023 form, and I don't know they've done something to find a way to maybe get Odegaard more involved. So I thought when Saka was receiving the ball, he wasn't necessarily in the box. He wasn't high up, but he also wasn't really coming to the ball. He was just kind of stationed around that 35-yard mark, which I thought was interesting. So when he got it, he was trying to draw people onto him, and then he was quickly passing it to Odegaard, who would usually be open. So I don't necessarily know if that was just a tweak for this game, but it definitely worked because a lot of Arsenal's really good moments came from Saka finding Odegaard, and then Odegaard would go to work trying to find some balls into the box. He created 3 chances. 13 passes into the final third. Rice and Saliba and Gabriel continue to not allow teams to lay a glove on Raya, and they're doing this without Zinchenko. Suddenly, Kewar is kind of working a little bit for them, and he's offering some support for Noah Martinelli, and by doing that, Martinelli is able to play a little bit more inside as well. And so maybe the only question here is uh, with the City draw, is this in Arsenal's hands now? If they win out now, they still have to beat City, obviously, but that might be enough. We'll have to see if Liverpool drop points elsewhere. Liverpool have a lot of injuries now. Arsenal don't. Now, on the flip side, can they handle a long Champions League run and a title charge and not sustain some kind of injury? They've been fortunate to have Odegaard, Martinelli, Xhaka, Rice, Saliba this season. They're missing Jesus, but they're about to get him back. He can be a rotation option. I don't think Jesus should play over Trossard. I think I said that last week. Uh, is there a way to rotate Rice and Saka some minutes, or do they just roll the dice? I don't necessarily know how they can find someone to play the Odegaard role. Maybe Fabio Vieira in some kind of games, but can you do that in a Champions League game? I don't really know, but that's really the thing to kind of watch. If Arsenal are able to finish the season without injuries, I think they're going to be your champions. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if that pans out. And then with Burnley, company was banned from the touchline, and they showed something last week, and it was only 2-0 at halftime. But it just they conceded so early in the second half that it was just defensively there were just too many spaces for Arsenal's runners to exploit. They didn't have any kind of pressing structure. It was bad, and it feels too much for them. And I think the positive is they don't have Arsenal or Liverpool to play anymore. So that was brutal, but yeah, it's not looking great for them. And they lost Ramsey to a bad injury, which is bad as well. And so that's how one part of North London played. So how did the other half play with Tottenham and Wolves? And Tottenham do go on to lose to Wolves 2-1. The first goal with Yao Gomez, I think it's just like a corner kick, and it's a free header. And then Kulishevsky. So it was 1-0 going into halftime, and then Kulishevsky makes it a 1-1 with actually losing my voice. Kulishevsky makes it 1-1 with basically he kind of I think it's a throw in, and the ball just kind of ricochets to him, and he does well to like roll the ball, and then he's able to kind of finish it from a tight corner, and then Yao Gomez again, and unfortunately for Tottenham, this comes from a corner kick that they have, and I think it's Zara Basuma who. Has a bad touch, and then I think it starts with Yao Gomez. He's able to play in Neto, and Neto has just 60, 70 yards to just sprint, and he's able to do it. And he's finally closed down, but he's able to cut back, and he's able to. I think it's maybe Emerson Royal that runs all the way back, and he's able to cut past him, and then he's able to make the right decision in the final third to have that cut back ball, and it finds Yao Gomez, and what a hit, what a hit first time, and Tottenham struggled a little bit after that. To be honest, they had. Now, Wolves were able to basically kind of play the game on their terms, and they were defending with a lot of numbers in the box, but Tottenham were struggling to create a lot of chances. And one thing that I saw was Ange took off, I think Richarlison kind of early in the second half to bring on, I think, a Timo Werner, and they were trying to play Son through the middle. But that didn't really work out. Son's really good when you have a lot of open space to play in the middle. When the game's really, really tight, you maybe need a little bit of a presence, a little striker presence in the box, and they really did miss that. There were a lot of times when they were passing the ball and it was just going side to side. They were looking to try to penetrate, but they couldn't. And yeah, that allowed Wolves to kind of see the game out a little bit. There was a chance very late in the end. I think Kulusevski had a really nice cross that found Ben Davies, and Ben Davies just couldn't get the header right. But it didn't feel like maybe that was deserved. I thought Wolves were quite good in their own right. So let's see. Tottenham had 15 chances, only 4 on target. Wolves had 12 and 7, so they outshot them, at least on target. The XGA was about 1.5 to 1.7. Tottenham with majority of the possession, but that is what it is. Uh, uh, again, Tottenham had majority of the ball, but Wolves had more shots on target. It was, they didn't have Cunha, but they did have Neto and Wang, and I thought that was kind of key a little bit for them. And Wolves had that rough out versus Brentford just a week ago, and man, were they able to really rebound. But it was also Tottenham were without Pedro Porro and Udogie, and I think you saw that a little bit in this game. They didn't have those fullbacks to be able to create those mismatches because no one was threatened when Ben Davies or Emerson Royal had the ball, and I think that kind of factored in a little bit in this as well. And maybe one thing you can say with Wolves was they didn't have Cunha, and they were actually able to get Sarabia some runs in behind, and it's not something I've always seen from him. And they actually were able to get Van de Ven into some situations. So I really liked what they were doing, and but I will get started with Tottenham. So mentioned how the mistake with taking off with Charlton, but Kulusevski is also a weird player as well. He scores a goal and actually set up, almost the equalizer. He's so good in 50-50 duels, and he's got very good elite ball retention, but he isn't the paciest player, and he's very one-footed. And I am wondering if well, there could have been a couple of times when we've actually seen him moved into midfield in second halves to maybe fit on Brendan Johnson. And Brendan Johnson does have the pace to get in behind. So I don't really know what you do with Kulusevski when you have Madison back as well, because Madison is kind of that player as well. And when Madison was hurt, you had Kulusevski playing as a 10. It didn't really matter. Now you have them both. It seems like they're kind of in the same. They want to play in the same kind of circles. So I think that's maybe clogging things up. I'm just kind of throwing a theme out there. But it's not the end of the world. But they did allow Aston Villa to kind of catch them a little bit. The injury to Porro and Udogie is serious though. So we'll have to see. We'll have to follow that. Going forward. Other than that, they do seem healthy again. But I mean, those are two pretty big misses. And then with Wolves, O'Neill is a good manager, and he keeps motivating his guys to respond. And one thing I really liked about their approach is they set up to play without the ball. They're sitting back and looking to play on the break, but when they had to keep it in tight areas, they were able to do that in the second half. I thought, to get some pressure off their back line and Yao Gomez, Lamina, Ait-Nour were very good at doing that. And then Neto, Wang, Chen ran their socks off. So I mean, it starts with Yao Gomez and Mario Lamina. I mean, good in possession, can handle being pressed and pick out passes. They can also dribble out of danger when that's needed as well, and excellent in tackle and winning the ball back defensively. And it's a very good pairing to have. And then you have Neto, Wang, and Sarabia. And when you can defend and poach the ball off teams, you need to have willing runners to sprint into space. And even Sarabia, I thought, was looking to offer more runs upfield this game. And there were a couple few chances, and they forced some pretty good big saves from Vicario. Pretty good setup, and one of the harder transition teams to play against in the league, to be honest. And pace is important. And when you can defend deep and you have numbers, and then you can break into a threatening attack, that makes you different. That makes you difficult to play. I thought the three center backs allowed them to defend deep. Toddy Gomez and Max Kilman and Dawson were a pretty good complement when they can defend deep, when they don't really have to. You can maybe run behind them, but when they're all already in the box, it doesn't really matter. And both are quite good at winning those duels in the air and getting those blocks. And I thought Semedo and Ait-Nouri, maybe usually defensive liabilities, but I thought they were great in this game. Did some good work defensively, but also it's not easy to handle Son. And I thought Semedo did a good job also picking out some really nice passes upfield, playing some runners in behind to start some attacks. So every time I speak about Neil of Wolves, I want to talk about Gary O'Neill, and I think it's warranted. He continues to get his teams to bounce back, and they never seem to let a loss derail them. And they lost Cunha, but got Wang and Neto back, and that helps. And so that did open the door for Villa, though. After Spurs did drop some points, so were they able to take advantage of that? And as we find out, the answer to that was yes. Let's see how we're doing for time. Worried because I know I'm going to spend a little time on Man United. Uh, they win 2-1. You get the first 2 goals with Ollie Watkins, and then Fulham come back with Rodrigo Munoz, and there was even a chance very late in the game where I thought Adama Traore was actually played on goal and forced a very big save out of Emi Martinez, or this could have ended 2-2. And watching, following this along a little bit, it seems like 2 games broke out here because Fulham were not competitive in that first half, but. Uh, Marco Silva made some subs, and unfortunately for U.S. fans, it might be the last time we see of Tim Ream because Calvin Bassey was back available. Tosin was on the bench, and for Fulham's case, the way we start the season, or the way we started the season, you had Tim Ream and you had Diop basically as the back two, and that was when Fulham almost looked like they were going to be a side that would be struggling for relegation. And it wasn't until basically we saw Calvin Bassey and Tosin, paired together that Fulham started to reverse that a little bit. And so Calvin Bassey came on for Tim Ream, and then another thing too is Alex Iwobi came on because they missed him from Afcon, and all of a sudden, Fulham started to create some chances. Started to Aston Villa were playing maybe weren't necessarily as great in possession. They were playing this game without Barbecue Kamara. They had to play John McGinn and Douglas Luiz in that middle instead. And while they were able to get the better of Paulinho, at least for that second goal with Ollie Watkins, which I'll get to, Paulinho was able to recover a little bit in the second half. Was able to get some of those turnovers. And again, like this, it felt like this game could have been a draw. And the thing to talk about is Spurs have some of those injuries that I mentioned with the fullbacks. Villa have a massive injury crisis with missing Konza because Matty Cash is still gettable in my opinion, or Longley. And another thing too is not having Barbecue Kamara is going to be massive for them, and that's probably going to lead to drop points as well. McGinn and Douglas Luiz both are quite good in their own right, but you're forcing McGinn to play in a position that's not really his strongest suit. And Douglas Luiz isn't necessarily he isn't great at winning the ball back. He isn't a traditional number 6, you could say. So we'll have to see how big those misses turn to be. Let's see. I mean, the first goal comes from just horrid of errors. It's like a Fulham throw in, and I think it's Anthony Robinson. Unfortunately for us, he just puts too much power on it. Villa pounce. Jacob Ramsey beats Willian to the ball, and then it's a 50-50 ball into the box. And then Watkins has a clever turn to pull D up, and then he has a nice finish. And then there was a chance where Leon Bailey hit the crossbar. Villa are just playing one-touch football around Fulham. It's really nice to see. It starts with Paul Torres, and he has a one-touch to Ramsey, and then Ramsey to Alex Moreno, and then back to Ramsey. It looks like Ramsey has a heavy touch, but Paulinho engages, but Ramsey's able to beat him. And then from there, he finds Leon Bailey, and then Bailey just kind of has Anthony Robinson's like too afraid of him, and it gives him the space. And Leon Bailey has a pop, and it just kind of hits the crossbar. Robinson did not have his best game, and Leon Bailey was basically taking him on time after time and kind of beating him. I thought Fulham were lucky to just only be down 1. I mean, I think Leno had to make a big save to stop Tielemans on a breakaway after a loose pass by William. They gave a ball to Watkins, and I thought Alex Moreno basically scored on a corner kick, and it was just kind of shocked offside. So Fulham were not competitive in that first half, and it didn't get better after this goal. So I thought this was actually goal of the weekend. And so it started with Paul Torres on the ball, and he runs into kind of a free space. And what he does is he drags Fulham to change their shape. They get Paulinho to chase the ball, leave in that central space. Torres and passes it backwards to Douglas Luiz, who quickly finds John McGinn. And then McGinn, so what's big is they don't recycle. They see that Paulinho is out of the picture, and this is a chance to kind of hurt Fulham, and he does. McGinn then turns and plays a nice forward-minded pass to Tielemans' feet, and then Tielemans, with one thought in mind, takes a touch and then quickly fires the through ball to Ollie Watkins to chase onto, and chase he does. And Watkins then finishes it with a great finish, finding the corner. It's quick thinking by every player. It's 1-2 touch passing. And but another thing too is you need willing runners to run without the ball to make any of this count. And Watkins is one of the best in the league at that, and he has the finish. But another reason why this goal is so good is Watkins is initially running back towards the ball and immediately reverses his feet once Tillmans gets it. And that's why kind of the Fulham back line is confused. The timing of Watkins changing direction and Tillmans immediately playing the pass is what undresses Fulham. And if Tillmans holds on to the ball, maybe Fulham can run back and recover. Maybe they can catch Watkins off sides. Anthony Robinson is kind of caught here because in the beginning he's running back because he wants Watkins to be offsides, and then Taylor basically beats him. But the Fulham back line is awful in the beginning. So Diop and Ream were kind of really high. Robinson is playing like everyone on sides like by 20 yards, and because he's worried about Leon Bailey, and that's kind of why the goal happens. So it was just kind of miscommunication and really good play by Aston Villa. But after that, things kind of changed. Fulham got one back with Munoz, just so Robinson kind of makes up a little bit for his mistake. So the goal comes from nothing really. Tom Carney just plays a hopeful ball for Robinson to chase, and Robinson beats Matty Cash and then sends it across towards the near post. And Munoz, to be fair, makes a run and gets a flick on to get it past Emre Martinez. It's great running by Munoz to make something out of nothing really, and he beats Longley flat-footed. And a couple chances late. So there's one with Wobie, and then there's one with Adama to force some saves. So I do think this game could have easily ended 2-2, and it is a good result though for Villa to bounce back. Good for Watkins as well to start scoring again, and second goal really was a sublime team goal. But Fulham were competitive a little bit more in the second half as well. So I mean, 15 shots, 4 on target, 12 shots, and only 3 on target. 1.5 for Fulham, 1.6 for Aston Villa as far as XG. Fulham had more possession. Fulham had more passes. So with Villa, I do think it's big to get Paul Torres back because he makes them click a little bit better. He's kind of their, I put down their Virgil van Dijk in possession. That's maybe not necessarily accurate, but it doesn't feel like it's that far off. He's elite when it comes to what he can do with the ball at his feet, and he's key to how they progress the ball. If the space is there, he'll carry it. He's really good at threading passes to unlock teams. He can fire balls into tight areas. He can also take some risks, but he's also really good at delivering long ball. And I don't think Villa have been the same since they lost him. In the last game they had him was versus Arsenal, and they beat Arsenal. So and when they had him, I think they were within a point or two of Man City and Liverpool at that point in the season. So. Missing him has been big, but once they get him back, now they're without Konza and now without Barbecue Kamara. So Unai Emery is never able to actually have his full team together, unfortunately for him. But they are back in the top four. We'll have to see if they're able to keep it. And then with Fulham, Iwobi and Calvin Bassey are back for them from AFCON, and I think this will be the last game they won't be starters. So unfortunately for Tim Ream. And then Munoz continues his good scoring for them. No Jimenez, no Broja, and he keeps Broja on the bench, and Iwobi back makes him better. He has a good reading of the game, and you saw that in the second half. And unfortunately for them, it's just I think both goals for them were kind of sloppy. It's good play by Villa for the second one, but it's also sloppy with the back line being disorganized. So. I mean, there's maybe another team though. So if it's not going to be Villa, if it's not going to be Spurs, can there be another team waiting in the wings, as they say? And now Man United are only 5 points off Villa and 3 from catching Spurs. And it's crazy to say that because given how people have been reacting to this team, myself included, and I can't figure out Man United to be honest because. Again, this is a game that I don't feel like they should have won. They get started with a really early 2-0 lead in the first 6 minutes. You thought, well, this is going to be quite easy for them, and anything but. And last week they escaped versus Aston Villa. You got the 3 points with Scott McTominay kind of being a hero for them late. And I mean, you figured Luton were going to give some kind of result or some kind of a performance because they lost to Sheffield last week, but they lost Adebayo right before this game and. Big game, big occasion. The stars came out. Harry Styles, I guess, was in attendance, and they kept showing him. So, he was treated to a good game. And so no difference in the starting 11 from Man United and Luton. They had to make that change with Adebayo, so it was Woodrow that came on, and it wasn't really like for like. Woodrow had a couple of chances, but it wasn't that serious. And then Chong versus former club. Chong had a couple actually. Chong had a role a little bit in the goal. I mean, this started with a great start for them. for Man United. It's just like I don't know, 30 seconds in the game, basically. They get to a point where like Bell can do like five things here, and he picks like the one that doesn't work. And he just got, I think it's like Harry Maguire or Casemiro just like boots the ball upfield, and the ball is just going to Bell. Maybe it has a bad bounce, but he has a chance to just do like so many things. And what he does is he mishits a pass basically, and Rasmus is able to run onto the free ball, and then he does really well to go around Kaminsky and finishes. Rasmus still has some work to do. And as we saw with the other teams, every other player in Man United was not able to do what Rasmus did. I think that's kind of funny. Rashford had a chance. Garnacho had a chance. Bruno had a chance in the second half to do some better stuff 1v1, and they weren't able to do it. And lo and behold, it's another situation where you don't really remember Rasmus having a lot of opportunities in the second half, and it's just very rare how again a lot of their attack still goes through either Garnacho or Bruno or Rashford, and it's not the guy that's actually scoring the goals for them. Uh, uh, but that said, also Rasmus didn't necessarily have the best game either outside of the goals. And the reason why I say that is a couple of the times he was losing the ball, and that was actually allowing Luton to have some of their better attacks. So there's give and take there. And then they get the second one, basically. I think it's a corner kick, and then Garnacho kind of tries a volley and just kind of deflects off Rasmus' chest to go in. And he was on a hat trick ratch after like 6 minutes. And then Rashford got onto a loose ball, carried it to the box, and he just couldn't hit the target. But it felt like this was going to be a rout. And then in the 15th minute, things changed. Man United have a giveaway. I think Hoyland's return pass just intercepted, finds Chong, and then Chong is able to, carry it into some space, and then he finds it out wide to Doughty, and Doughty returns it to Chong into the box, and Chong just takes a chance. It's blocked, but it deflects, an awkward area, and Carlton Morris is braver than Onana to attack a loose ball to get us game again. 14 minutes in, it felt like it was going to be maybe a Newcastle game where it was like 4-4 for Luton Town. And then really after that, the chances kind of just came to them. There's Maguire had just like passes it to Barkley. I think it's a Man United free kick after Maguire is fouled, and he just makes a terrible decision to pass it back to Barkley. He has Woodrow in the box, and then Woodrow is not really the player to you kind of want, I guess, if you're Luton. And he has a shot that's maybe weak. It's also blocked by Varane, but it's an insane error by Maguire here that's not really punished. But I do have a couple notes here where Rasmus was maybe careless a little bit in possession. He loses the ball again where he's trying to pass to Rashford. It's cut out. Luton have Benny streaking upfield after Morris has a flick on. So he takes Maguire out of the play, and then Benny is basically free to do whatever he wants on his own. And it nearly leads to something. I think a couple minutes later, Morris has a shot that basically just misses. But there's chaos. There's chaos here. Man United had multiple times to kill this, and they keep playing it into trouble, allowing Luton to turn them over and to break instead. Garnacho loses the ball running into Carlton Morris, who says, thank you. And then Morris has a carry to the top of the box before firing in something from distance, and it doesn't miss by much. And then Casemiro is maybe lucky not to get sent off in the first half. Kind of a rash challenge, and it comes after a poor touch from him. And so you were figured, well that's not great. He's probably going to be subbed off. And then Luton had a chance very late in the first half with Doughty, and it's a lovely chance as well. Chong gets the ball in free space again. He's able to find Carlton Morris, who then does well to drag Harry Maguire out of position. That happened a lot. And then he's able to kind of flick it over Maguire, and then Doughty runs onto the loose ball, kind of top of the box, and he has a hit, but it just misses wide. I mean, the halftime thought was they couldn't have started worse, but they did rebound well. Luton were enjoying, I thought, driving at Harry Maguire. Ross Barkley was having some nice nutmegs and able to get behind players, be able to set up teammates in the final third. I thought Doughty was having a really nice first half as well. That was the note I had. Had that miss, but he had some clever runs out wide and was having what was good too is he was kind of forcing Dallo he was running inside sometimes, and it was hard for Dallo to track. I thought he was making good decisions, and it showed good delivery. And then with Man United, defensive issues was showing up again. They had to lose Luke Shaw towards the end of the first half to bring on Lindelof. Maybe that worked out because Lindelof was maybe a little bit better on Ogbeni than necessarily Shaw was. Ogbeni was just having fun that first half. Lindelof wasn't necessarily as aggressive going forward, so Ogbeni didn't nearly have as much space. But they were losing the midfield battle to Barkley and Lokanga. And I was a bit shocked we didn't see maybe Eriksson come on for Casemiro in the second half. Instead, we saw McTominay come on, and I don't necessarily think that made Man United better. And then that basically was the subs. We also saw Maguire come off for Johnny Evans, which was a bit of a surprise. And Man United did have a number of chances to kill this game off. So there's one to Dallo, like really early. There's a wonderful ball by Onana. Flights it perfectly. Dallo makes a run unmarked. Doughty can't keep up. It's one of the few times where Doughty did kind of mess up. Onana just picks out Dallo, and maybe the only thing is Dallo could do better, but because he doesn't even get a shot off. But Kaminsky does really well to dive on the ball and prevents any further damage. And then there's a chance for Bruno, another 1v1 missed. So Johnny Evans first does really well to stick out a foot to stop Morris. And then from there, Bruno gets the ball, plays it to Hoyland. Hoyland does well to hold up to the ball. So, when I had him a little bit in the first half, he does well here. The chance comes from Hoyland's hold up play here. So he holds on to the ball, and then with someone on his back shoulder, and what that means is the defender is on his back shoulder. That means the defender isn't behind him, and plays it back to Bruno, and then Bruno finds Garnacho. And Garnacho basically returns the ball to Bruno, continuing his run unmarked, and then Bruno plays it. Garnacho plays it to Bruno because, and the reason why Bruno is unmarked is, like I said, the defender, the center back defender has followed Hoyland, and he's out of the play, and then Bruno is basically able to run behind him, and it's too quick for Luton to be able to recognize it, and Bruno is basically in on goal. And the only thing is, it looks like Bruno is going to be able to go around Kaminsky, and out of nowhere, Samuel Lokonga does really well to recover, and he has a goal-saving block. Otherwise, Bruno has an open net, and he's passing it in. So amazing play by Lokonga, really good play by both teams here, to be honest. And then there was another chance with the Garnacho, and it's a big save by Kaminsky as well. And Luton again are trying to send guys forward. You understand that? I mean, there's a cross whipped into a packed box. It's defended first by Johnny Evans, headed away, and then it finds Rashford. And then this is one of those times when Doughty again is a little bit asleep, and Garnacho is able to get goal side of him, and then Garnacho basically gets on his bike, and Rashford plays him in. And Garnacho is all alone, 1v1 with the keeper, and tries to go around him, and Kaminsky does just enough to get a glove to make it awkward. But Garnacho still decides to, and he decides against swinging his right foot off balance because it's still an empty net. And instead, he tries to collect the ball and he tries to cut and go around Kaminsky again. And by that time, Luton are able to get their numbers back, and nothing comes from that. So, I mean, Kaminsky was amazing in these 1v1s. And then there was maybe another one in the 78th minute when it looked like Hoyland got the ball into the box. This isn't really a 1v1. This is just Hoyland having it's one of the few times when Hoyland was in the box and fed in by Garnacho, and he's off balance. But he to be fair to him, he gets a good shot off. It's just a really good save by Kaminsky. Again, you can't really critique anyone here. It's good play by both the keeper and Hoyland. And then Bruno was given a gift but couldn't convert his shot, firing it wide. And then a note I have here is it's like it's 92 minutes, so 2 minutes into the 4 of stoppage time. United have the ball on the corner flag. This is absolutely ideal. And Bruno decides to tries to beat Kaminsky from distance, and just gives it right back to Luton to have another attack, and they get it. And the questions were those missed chances going to bite Man United, and it almost did. Luton get a very late corner kick, the ball sent in, and Ross Barkley gets a header on it, free header, and he chips the paint off the crossbar, just barely missing it. So there are two ways to look at this. Man United have won 5 in a row. Man United have gone 3 games in a row, allowing 20-plus shots at their goal. Luton outpassed and outshot Man United, and they gifted away that opening goal. So I mean, Luton with 22 shots, 4 on target. That's kind of the issue. Man United with 21 shots and 9 on target. I mean that's the issue as well. I mean, Kaminsky was big because Man United could have walked away with this. To be fair to them, 2.9 xG, that kind of says it all. Says it as well. Luton though with 59% of the ball, and they outpassed Man United 441 to 229 or to 299. 76% possession completion percentage, and that is crazy to me. Luton had a better organization in my opinion, and I thought Barkley and Lokonga kind of outshone a little bit Kobe Mano and Casemiro, but it doesn't really matter because Man United get the win, so that's all that matters, and Luton could still go down. I mean, they performed well outside of that early opening 30 minutes or 30 seconds, but they're not out of this yet, and missing Adebayo is a big miss because it allows them to teams can maybe focus a little bit on Carlton Morris. You can't focus on both, and they get so many crosses into open play. It's how they create a lot of chances with both, mismatches with, Adebayo and Morris, so it's not insignificant that they're gonna miss him, so they need to find a way to get, some more chances on goal because, creating 22, but only 4 on target. Uh, I will get started with Man United. I mean, I don't necessarily wanna be negative. It doesn't feel like they have a structured pressing structure in place. They were reliant on Luton making mistakes than necessarily them winning the ball back. It was a fun opening, game back and forth, and was wondering if that was a Maguire effect, but then, Evans had to come on, in the second half. Though that said, Evans is maybe more stable, but, you can also, you can't, play a high line with him too, so the same issues exist. Hoyland's positive, Garnacho positive, Mano, was positive, and that's pretty much it. Shaw had to be subbed off. Maguire and Varane poor together. Casemiro, I thought, got bullied a little bit by Sammy Lokonga. He only won 1 duel and 80% pass accuracy, and that's not when you're in the middle of the field, 80% accuracy isn't enough, especially you're trying to be an elite team. I thought Rashford and Bruno's decision making was equally poor as well. And, I think Bruno just allows for an open game when he plays. He just, he's too attack minded. That can lead to goals, but it can also lead to mistakes. So, uh, but at the same time, I did feel like maybe McTominay was going to be the hero at the end for them because that's going to be a theme for them. And they are living on a knife edge though. And I don't want to sound like a header, but because I feel like I say this the exact same thing with Man United uh, every season for the last like 2 or 3 seasons. But the thing is they did this last season. They rode their luck every single game, and they were able to get top 4. So I mean, it feels fool's gold, but they're at the same time they've been able to make a fool out of me for multiple seasons running now. Is this going to come back and haunt them or not? I can't say. It's so weird how they're allowing 20 plus shots a game on them every single game week. That's a lot of pressure on Anana, even if many aren't necessarily on him. And one note I had is when they get him back, do we maybe eventually see Mason Mount try it in the Bruno role essentially without Bruno? Maybe you give Bruno some rest because I feel like maybe he'd make some better decisions. But Bruno can be genius. He can be creative as hell. He always has a good finish on him. But he takes so many risks sometimes when you're giving the ball away. That's not what you need. And sometimes they don't really have someone to just kind of control the game a little bit. I was surprised Christian Eriksen we didn't see. We haven't seen him with Kobe Mano for a full maybe I think we saw it versus maybe for a half versus Southampton. And again, Ericsson doesn't have the legs. You can probably run around him, but at least he gives you a little bit some control. So I can't necessarily say with Luton Town, um, it's hard not to really be positive. I think it's about celebrating what Rob Edwards has been able to build here. Uh, because after the 14th minute, it was like a new game. Like he's able to install a mindset to get these players uh, to wipe out what happened and to really give things a go. And I thought their shape, I thought they were better organized. I thought their midfield played better. And yeah, mentioned Doughty and Agbeni. I think it's a throwback, honestly, the way they play with the crossing. A lot of managers don't like risky crosses because sometimes you cross into a pack box. There's unpredictableness, and sometimes you can actually expose yourself to some counters. We did see that in the second half. But Luton also take their chances, and chaos is chaos. Sometimes you can create a defenders don't really like chaos or goalkeepers as well. So maybe you're floating in a ball to create some chaos. Um, Maybe it's unpredictable, but at the same time, it's unpredictable for the other team too. So I quite like the way they go about it. And Liverpool next, and they drew Liverpool in November. It being at Anfield, I don't think that's necessarily going to be that much different. Though that said, Luton at home or world beast. They gave Arsenal fits, they gave Man City fits, they gave Chelsea fits, and gave Man United fits. And they didn't necessarily always get points. To beat Newcastle as well. So I mean, at that ground is they're quite good at home, and maybe that's kind of one thing to say about them. Maybe they can stay up because of that home form. Now they did lose to Sheffield at home, and they're like the only team that's like that can handle this Kenilworth Road. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what they do with Liverpool next. But after that, their schedule kind of shapes up okay for them. And if they can get Morris and Adebayo together for the final run of like 8 games, I think they could be okay. They'll also be okay if what happens with Nottingham Forest, if they get a points deduction or something. If it comes down to again Luton versus Everton, I think Everton have a way to kind of scrap some results here and there. I don't really know if they have a way to win a lot of games. If they now maybe they can find a way to just kind of win a bunch of like 1-0s. But Everton also kind of create chaos. They play a similar kind of way. To be honest, Dyche likes going very direct in a way that Luton do. But another thing too is they maybe he understands that maybe they aren't the best defensively, but Rob Edwards has this team that is very good at trying to win the ball back in a way that again I don't feel like we saw any of this in the beginning of the season, but their pressing structure is quite good. And Barkley and Lukanga, when they get the ball, they're not making rash decisions. They're actually it's not always to get the ball over the top to make a Morris or a Benny or a Doughty make a 50-50 run where it's not necessarily always on. They're quite good at doing the tempo. So I don't know. I like what I've seen from them, and we'll just it'll be unfortunate if they actually do go down. And I'm one of the ones that was beginning to. I was a serious doubter in the beginning, and it's mea culpa on my end. And then with Newcastle and Bournemouth, this one goes to 2-2. I'm gonna try to maybe do some of these a little quicker than I normally do. Yeah, I'm already at 2 minutes. Already at the 2 mark. Uh, Solanke gets the opening, scoring with just a mistake from Dubravka. Unfortunately, he just like slips. Bournemouth are doing well to press Newcastle to make this mistake. It's worth saying, and then they get the second one with and then there's like a PK, kind of unfortunately awarded, and it's one of those. I mean, the shirt's being pulled, but I think the shirt's being pulled maybe before he gets into the penalty area. It's one of those kind of 50-50 ones, but, cheap PK, and then Anthony Gordon's able to make that. And then, Bournemouth, they, get one back again, get the lead after, Semenyo. And what happens is, I think it's Solanke. Solanke runs, to kinda be an option to receive the ball in the middle of the field. It's maybe the one critique of Newcastle is Bruno Guimaraes is not a holder. He's so good on the ball. He's like a five-tool everything, but he's not an actual holding defensive midfielder himself. Now, he can do a job, win the ball back, but there are times when he's not always in that position. And maybe the Longstaff is supposed to be when he plays, and he just wasn't here either. But there's no one kind of in the middle of the area, and that forces kind of Botman to run out to Solanke, and Solanke is able to quickly receive the ball, and then he finds basically what that does is that isolates Semenya versus Dan Burn. And if you're Newcastle, that's not what you want. If you're Bournemouth, that's exactly what you want. That's what you're doing. And they get Semenya versus Dan Burn, and Semenya cooks him. Yeah, Dan Burn allows him to have basically 8 yards of gap because he doesn't want to get tight. Otherwise, he's going to be able to go around him. And he allows Semenya to dribble all the way up to the top of the box. And then Semenya basically beats the keeper. Now, maybe Dan Burn's doing a good job because he's forcing. This is not the easiest chance in the world to score, and usually you expect maybe a keeper to make the save. So it just wasn't maybe the best day for Dubravka. And then right at the end, when it looked like this is going to be drop points again for Newcastle, or anyhow maybe a loss again, they sub Matt Ritchie on. Bruno has a fantastic kind of a cross into the air. It's one of those situations where they're able to actually get the I guess the Bournemouth fullback, or I guess it's Tavernier in this space, kind of question himself because he's worried about Trippier in the beginning, and then what happens is Matt Ritchie kind of makes a run in between, and it forces basically 2v1. And if you're I think it's Tavernier. If you're a Tavernier, you don't know if the ball is going when the crosses come. You don't know if the ball is coming over your head or if it's coming in front of you, and he has to make a decision. And basically, what he does is he kind of slips, and that allows Matt Ritchie to have the free header. And I think Matt Ritchie is first trying to square the ball, and then he gets the deflection to go his way, and then he's able to get it in. Um, but the storyline coming into this is Eddie Howe versus former Bournemouth side. Again, it didn't go well the first meeting, and it doesn't necessarily go well here. I mean, Bournemouth did beat them 2-0 back in November. Solanke, I think, enjoyed scoring versus them in that game, and he scored in this game. And then Newcastle, I mentioned last week that maybe missing Nick Pope hadn't showed up yet, and in this game, I think that did show up. I'm not gonna go with Dubravka for the slip, but I do think he could do better on the first save. And what's unfortunate for to say is Bournemouth honestly could have been out of sight after the first half. Dubravka actually made a number of really big saves to keep Newcastle in this. Bournemouth were quite good at being able to create. I think Bournemouth looked better when Semenya plays for them, and Kluivert was able to get going again, and they were able to get Solanke involved in a way that just we hadn't seen a lot. Solanke had a lot of chances, and the way he scores is kind of lame. It comes from the goalkeeper slipping, but he was at the heart of like everything positive that Bournemouth were doing again, and we hadn't seen that in a while, and they were solid. That's kind of the rundown. I mean, a point feels fair, I think, for both. Newcastle did have majority of the ball, but Bournemouth, I thought, were more threatening. And I do think Bournemouth targeted Dan Burn. And I mean, Newcastle 17 shots, 5 on target. Bournemouth 12 shots and 7. That was a theme we saw a lot in this game or this week. There were teams that were maybe being outpossessed, but and maybe being outshot. But those teams were also having more shots on target, and that's what really mattered. I mean, Bournemouth only had 174 passes. Uh, we'll get started with Bournemouth. I thought that the tactic to use Solanke and Semenyo to draw Newcastle center backs out of position to isolate Dan Burn, I thought was intentional. They're also their high pressure, forced the mistake. They forced the pass backwards, and that's when the slip happened. Um, and then Kluivert back in his 10 role. There've been a couple games where we hadn't necessarily seen that, and I do think they still lack a little control in to see games out. Better possession. Maybe Newcastle don't get that late chance, so there could be some of that. And they turn around and have Man City next, and Man City blasted them 6-0 back in November. So can Bournemouth turn around and maybe fix some of that? I don't necessarily. I'm not holding my breath. We'll have to say. Doku, I think, announced himself. He had 2 goals and like 2 assists in that game, and so we'll have to see how Bournemouth react. And then with Newcastle. I do think not having the traditional GM or DM defensive midfielder is hurting them a little bit, but really it's Dan Burn, and I do think Howe needs to stop this. I don't like doing the agendas, but I feel like it's impossible to not notice it. Um, and I do think they've been playing a little bit more consistent. I think Bruno has saved them the last couple of games, but uh, and it is worth saying this: they didn't have a Stack, they didn't have a Callum Wilson, they haven't had Joe Linton the whole season. They're having to rely on Lewis Miley, who's 17 years old. They get Spin Botman back, but it feels like maybe he's lost a yard of pace, and Dan Burn isn't really good enough cover for him. So Livermento has to start the next game. And how taken off Dan Burn in I think at the 70th minute for Livermento, I think shows he understands this. But we'll have to see if that actually does show. And then Everton and Palace played to a 1-1 draw. A really great goal by Jordan Ayew, and then Onana is able to equalize after it's just kind of a corner kick, and Onana just dumps over everyone. This actually looks indefensible, to be honest. He did something similar to I think Burnley, because he's 6'4" and he's got such a high jump as well. It's like it's a cheat code almost, and he didn't even start the game. He only came on in the second half, so that was positive. The first half was just really really dreadful, to be honest. I'm not really going to talk a lot about the game. One thing I do want to say is Everton needed this because they started in that final spot, and the 1 point does take them above Luton on goal differential, and they did get Adelaide Decore back, which will help them down the stretch. And with Crystal Palace, it does look like Roy Hodgson, the Chelsea game was the last one for Roy Hodgson, and they've decided to either move on from him or he stepped down. Apparently, he's been ill as well, which isn't great. And I do think it's the right call, but at the same time, I think it's a shame he didn't walk away after last season, because he was a hero. He came in after Patrick Vieira, and you talk about a purple patch or a new manager bump. They went on a crazy run of form, winning a lot of games and scoring a lot of goals. And basically, all he was doing is he was playing Elise and Eze together, something that Patrick Vieira wasn't doing. He also had Zaha back returned, and Palace were ended the season one of the more fun teams to watch. And unfortunately, just the team's not the same with the injuries that they've had. And in comes a new manager from Frankfurt, Oliver Glasnow. a Europa winning manager with Frankfurt a couple of years ago when they beat Rangers, and I also think of in that time Frankfurt beat West Ham, so maybe he has a little experience going through past EPL teams. And they were a high flying attack side a couple years ago. They enjoyed it. Kalu Muani, who moved to PSG, and they're still I think sixth or seventh when it comes to goals scored in Germany. I think they're in the sixth spot as well. So obviously, he looks like a good manager. But he's taking a big risk to come into this because I mean the lineup into this was really rough. Um, they had a so it was like I think they went to a back three and they basically played. It was Jefferson Lerma, and it was Adam Wharton in midfield. And Chris Richards was back into his normal spot in the back line. But I mean they don't really have any inequality to really get any of those passes together. And really, they were saved by IU having a wonder shot. Even it's not just Elise, Eze. Any of their creative players like Rick Saki apparently has a hamstring injury. There's Mateus Franca, but he's so young. But there's really not a whole lot after that. And you do now. Another thing is we did see Mateta and Edouard together. So that is something that hadn't been something we had already seen, but I don't necessarily want to get into a lot of the games because not a lot did happen. I do feel like it was a game of desperation for both teams. Maybe that was the reason why it was so slow to begin with, because neither team was really wanted to make a mistake, so there wasn't a lot of risk taking. I think they said Pickford had the most touches or second most touches in the game at halftime. Everton did finish with 19 shots though, only four on target. They had, I think, a little bit majority of the ball, five big chances, and they outpassed Crystal Palace, 420, 80% to Palace's 200. Palace didn't really play with midfielders, and this team on roster does look set to go down. They do have a 5 point gap, but it feels like it's going to be rough. And with Everton, I thought one of the changes maybe that made them better in the second half was they took Ashley Young, who started on the wing, to for Jack Harrison, who was significantly better, more attack minded, provided some good delivery into the box. And I think what's funny is Everton, with Calvin Lewin not being able to go, Everton don't really have an issue when it comes to being direct, especially with the quarterback. And you can get some of those runs from elsewhere. It's funny they gave away Maupay to Brentford, and you know, when they make the game frantic, you need someone to just kind of finish some chances into the box. They don't really have that. Now, Mapai, you can't really go long with him because that's the problem Brentford's having. But in and around the box, maybe he can do stuff. Everton have, Chimiti, who hasn't really worked out. Beto hasn't really, gotten flying for them. I think they only said he has one goal. Um, Jacob Dobbin is a bench option to maybe, do some stuff. He had that goal versus Chelsea. But this is a team that struggles. They struggle to pass their lines. They do well when the game is actually chaotic and open. But at the same time, the back line can be exposed a little bit. Now Braithwaite is okay, but Tarkowski can be a little iffy, and we saw that with Man City last week. So that's kind of where we are with Everton and with Palace. Gehi, Decore, as a Elise, it's too much to overcome. So I mean, we'll see what Glasgow can do, but I'm iffy. And then with Brighton beats Sheffield 5-0. Holgate, red card, kind of just into the game. Brunette gets the first one, and he's starting to really actually come good for them, which is good to see. He's not really played, not really playing as kind of one of the main attackers on the wing. He's now kind of given almost like a number 10 role in the CISO role. And he's showing he's got a pretty good finish on him. There are a couple of weeks now in a row that he's starting to score for them. So that's positive. He's also young too. It's worth saying that. Uh, and then Welbeck gets a second. And then Jack Robinson has an own goal. So I think it was only 2-0 going into halftime. And then Jack Robinson own goal. And then Adingra comes back from African Cup of Nations as a champion with Ivory Coast and gets two as well. And Brighton were maybe unlucky not to or to concede so late for Spurs, and then Sheffield were actually a bit of a high after beating Luton Town last week, and it was like it was wondering, well, maybe they can find a way to rebound from that. The week before they had given up five to Aston Villa, and they were back home at their own ground, and what did they do? They shipped five again. because of that Holgate red. And I don't really have to go over the game. I didn't have it. It didn't even write the stats. For Brighton, though, it's big that they have Adingra and Matoma back. Adingra back off his African Cup of Nations win, gets 2 goals here, and again that width allows Bernete to play a little bit more centrally, which I think he'll enjoy. And another thing too is I think they didn't have Yao Pedro, so that's another reason why Bernete can kind of enjoy that little free roll. Another thing too is I think Lamptey makes them better. And the problem for De Zerbi is he's not able. He's always able to play Lamptey either from the left or the right. And but when he's played on the left, and I didn't even know he had this in his game before this season. I think that's been when Brighton has actually looked their strongest. And I don't know if Stupien is struggling to recover from injury. He's been able to play, but he hasn't seemed right even since he's recovered. Now he's had a couple like really nice goals, but defensively he seemed a little off it. He's maybe their second choice left back when if Lamptey is healthy. To be fair, no one's as quick as Lamptey as well. But some of those overlaps, I think it makes them a little bit more different. That and when we saw versus Crystal Palace, one of the reasons was because of Lamptey, what he was offering, and with Sheffield, they're done. It's I think one thing to kind of say is this team maybe doesn't even make promotion last season without the contributions from Ilian Ndiaye, who is a lead scorer and a lead assister, who started for Senegal in African Cup of Nations. And he's now in Europa getting minutes for Marseille. I think he even got a goal. Uh, so I mean, it's you had that kind of quality. I think he's only 24 years old as well. You lost him, and you were never able to replace him. They tried with Cam Archer. Cam Archer is young. Also, in this case, you couldn't do much because you lost. You had to take off a man after 10 minutes into the game. You had to change a sub. So this was 'cause they went to a back five with 10 men. And you're already down 2 goals, so they didn't have a striker. Yeah, I think it was just McAtee to maybe make some runs ahead. It was bad. Uh, yeah, I mean, and I'm talking about the striker, but I mean, striker's one thing. It's the worst team ever when it comes to goals conceded. So they brought in Mason Holgate to maybe try to address some of that, and that hasn't worked out either. So just a lot of mistakes made with this club, and they're going to go down. Probably be the first one to go down, with Burnley not far away from them, and then with Nottingham and West Ham, battle of the Hams, and see how we're doing for time. Oh, it's not too bad. Maybe I can actually spend some time talking about the game. Uh, I think with Nottingham coming into this, you're starting to sense something here with Nuno, and I think with West Ham, how are they going to respond to that Arsenal thumping? Can they do what Brighton did recently after their Luton Town loss, or Sheffield? After getting shut up by Villa, because both teams were able to follow that up with a win. Antonio was back. You figured that could maybe be a bonus, and would there be a way to figure out a way to play Calvin Phillips and Alvarez together? And I think you saw in the second half, or really in the whole game, the answer is no. And it's not just Calvin Phillips was just really rash. Maybe he's unlucky to actually get the second yellow, but he gets 2 yellows in basically a minute. Um, the first yellow he gets from just being really dumb. He's trying to take a free kick, and Dominguez isn't allowing it. The ref is going to blow that anyway, so the ref is going to say, "Hey, that you're obstructing the game. I mean, that's you're delaying the game. That's an automatic yellow." But Calvin Phillips, like, basically, forcibly pushes him off and like throws him to the ground. So it's an instant reaction yellow. And then just a couple minutes later, he tries to go for a 50-50 ball. He goes with his boot high up and catches the player. It's a foul. Maybe it's not a yellow, but when you're already on a yellow, just a couple minutes before this, it's dumb to do. And I think one thing you've really seen is even in the games when he's played, he doesn't look fit. He's you imagine maybe he'd be able to uh, uh, recover or cover a lot of ground, and he doesn't. He looks slow, and I don't really know what you can do. And and he wasn't really terrible on the ball, at least in this point. But I thought what Nottingham were actually having a lot of fun to go around him. Finding a way to being clever. Getting him out of position, and then slipping either Tavares or slipping Callum Hudson-Odoi. in areas he just couldn't cover, and that's really what Nottingham Forest were doing in that first half. They were having fun with Tavares and Hudson-Odoi, and West Ham were not able to really cover for that. Uh, Elanga and Awani were having chance after chance as well. Actually, their keeper Ariola did well to actually make a couple saves where this could have been really ugly, to be honest. And it took a while for them to get the first goal. First goal does come to Awani right before halftime. So Tavares has a cross, it's blocked, but the rebound finds Dominguez, who plays a slick hard pass to thread a needle to find Awani in the box, and Awani has a great turn to collect it, and he turns and creates a goal, and then he's able to have the finish, and it's a really nice goal. And Awani is starting to pick up a little bit for them pre-injury, and the halftime thought was West Ham were not competitive, and Antonio showed us. There was one time when Antonio, it was kind of a chaotic a little bit, where Areola had to make a big save. So Calvin Phillips leaves Tavares to corner off Danilo, and Danilo quickly plays the pass to Tavares, who's free. Soufal has to worry about Hudson-Odoi, so he can't do anything here. And then Tavares does well to carry the ball upfield, plays it to Hudson-Odoi, who has a cross. The cross is blocked, but the rebound finds Dominguez and then has a poor touch, but he's able to get the ball to Gibbs White. Gibbs White has a shot. That's saved by Ariola, and then West Ham have the chance to counter. And Kudos is able to play Antonio, and Antonio has all the room to carry the ball upfield, and he shows rest, basically. Maybe he's out of ideas, I don't know, but he has Morello to engage, and he can't beat him. Morello actually pokes the ball off him. Antonio doesn't even get a shot off. And that kind of sums up West Ham right now. It's also really good 1v1 defending by Morello, to be fair, because he takes a chance to stick a leg out, but, there should have at least been some kind of effort on goal, and they don't even get that. So, defensively, I thought they were struggling. I thought the Forest overload of Hudson-Odoi and Tavares was giving them fits, and again, Ariola kept them from being blown out. And then things didn't improve in the second half. There was an Elanga chance with a volley, and then Hudson-Odoi wins the ball off Bowen. Then Awani plays a quick pass to Gibbs White all alone. Gibbs White then finds Elanga top of the box, and Elanga's best first touch isn't necessarily great, but he decides to take a lash at it with a volley, and man, does he hit this! This is on goal too, so that forces a save. And then the chaos happens with Calvin Phillips. I already kind of mentioned that. And then there's a really good play, I think, before this, before the foul that sets us up. So Tavares, again, has a nice pick-out pass to Gibbs White under pressure. And then Phillips is just kind of a second late to get on to Gibbs White. And then he sticks the foot out and brings him down. It could have been worse as well because it looks like Nicky Williams had a chance to get clipped in the box by Cornet. That wasn't given, but they do get the second goal late with Hudson-Odoi. And I have no idea if Origi actually meant this, but what he does is he's chesting the ball first, and then he turns and uses his back foot to flick it behind him to empty space for Nicky Williams to then run onto. It's like the cheekiest flick by Origi here. It doesn't feel like he needs to do this, but this is just like really cool to watch. And then Nico avoids the defender, and then he has a nice square ball hard in the 6-yard area. It goes to no one, but Odoi basically gets on the end of it and fires it near post. Awesome to see Odoi responding a little bit to with his career, so that is good to see. There was fears that after the Bournemouth game, maybe he was going to be out again. So it's good to see that that didn't really affect him much, and he is starting to ever since Nuno arrived, Hudson-Odoi has started to be influential again. He had that wonderful goal versus Bournemouth. He had a shot that basically deflected in versus Newcastle, and he scores here. So starting to be a little consistency here. And West Ham were bad again. And I think the two sides to the story here. Forest is starting to build something a little bit with Nuno. 19 shots and 8 on target, 4 big chances for them. This was before really the red card. West Ham were being outplayed before they went down a man, and then with down a man they had no chance. Getting started with Forest. Some players to highlight is Awani is quite good, and it's just kind of maybe disappointing he had to come off in the 65th minute. Maybe it was precautionary. He was on a yellow as well. You don't really want it to be an injury because he makes them tick a lot better than what they were doing before. Hudson-Odoi and Elanga were unplayable. Gibbs White is enjoying that 10 role because both are really good at providing some of that width. Awani and Elanga are quite good at making those runs. So Hudson-Odoi doesn't always have to be the player doing that. Hudson-Odoi can play in half spaces. Tavares was quite good at providing width in this case, and they were having fun with that, a little bit of that overlap on that side. And Nico Williams enjoyed his football on the other side as well. And with Tavares and Nico Williams, uh, former Arsenal player and former Liverpool player, they did well to keep Kudus and Bowen quiet, but also provided some good stuff in the attack. So really good performances from them. The Dominguez and Danilo pairing is interesting. It's one of those spots where I thought maybe Gio would have a chance, but Dominguez is actually starting to play some pretty good football. And Danilo is getting a chance because they shipped Oriol Mangala to France. He's on Lyon now. He even started last game and scored. So the only negative to them is the points deductions, the financial fair play ruling still looms. And is that going to affect them? Because if not, I think they're going to play their way to safety. Felipe was back and Muriel. That was a pretty good defending partnership. Uh, they have some core guys now forming for some Forest fans to kind of believe a little bit here. And I think in a way, Nuno coming in has just without changing any players is getting more out of his team than Steve Cooper did. And I think Moyes is kind of in that trap now where he's not able to play multiple style. Him not being able to play multiple styles is killing him with fans, but also with points and results. But it's also fans can see that uh, without even like changing players, if you have a manager that just gives teams a little bit more freedom, you can get some better football. And Forest is starting to be enjoyable. And I never would have said that with Steve Cooper, the way that they were playing before. It was always back five. It was never play with the ball. Maybe do some counter stuff. Forest are taking chances now, and they're more. It's one of the things with Nuno. He wasn't terrible at Wolves. It's just what happened with him is they didn't have any way to replace what happened when Raul Jimenez, uh, fractured his skull. Essentially, that was like the main target man, and Adama was really good at creating chances for Jimenez. And when you lost that, just everything just really did kind of peter out, and there was no way for them to kind of rebound because they didn't really have any other options, and that's kind of where that kind of ended up falling back on. And it's been cheeky for them to go to Saudi and be like, "Hey, would you be interested in managing us again?" And it's been one of the better decisions that a club has made, at least from bottom teams and bottom 10 teams. And with West Ham, they were poor with before the red. So I mean, Areola kept them in the game. So I mean, Antonio back, he's rusty. Maybe the rust will come off. You don't really hope it was anything other than that. Calvin Phillips pre-red card was, I guess, tidy on the ball, but he didn't look fit. I think it's good that this Cornet was able to get a run out, regardless of him nearly giving away a penalty. Emerson, I think, is another problem though. Defensively, him and Sufal, they defensively they seem a little bit off it now. And Nottingham team are a team that's fighting relegation. And on the back of the Arsenal game, where you're going to see a response, and you don't see that. They look like a relegated squad, West Ham, and they're like ninth in the table, and they're enjoying all the good work that they did before this, and their season's not done though. I mean, they still have a chance to kind of get back in this. They still have Europa to compete in, but losing Pacata has just completely killed any momentum this team had. And it's similar to Man United. There's not a pressing structure to win the ball back. Everything is reliant on transitions. And their last team win was Arsenal in December, and that was the last game they had Paqueta. So I don't think that's a coincidence. And so that's where we're at. And let's see how we did for time. And it's not always going to be like that, but it's not too bad. So it'll be easier next week because there's only really one game. It's the I think it's FA Cup for some people, and then it's a Carabao, or maybe there might be some league games, but it's really the Carabao final that I'll probably spend most of my time talking about, or not. If Liverpool get blasted because of all those injuries, and Chelsea's team are enjoying the trophy, then maybe I'll just ignore it. We'll see. Probably not. I'll probably talk about it. Regardless, it'll be. Yeah, I don't really know what to expect, to be honest, because Chelsea have been one of those helter-skelter kind of teams. They get the good result versus Man City, but can they turn around, and can that be maybe a blessing in disguise? Maybe they get high on their own supply. I don't really know. I do think the injuries to Liverpool are serious and can factor in. Liverpool did beat them 4-0 at Anfield just a couple of weeks ago, and Conor Bradley was kind of man of the match. So, does that show up again? And that was without Mo Salah, and they had Mo Salah back potentially. So, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. And so, I'll be back to talk about that. And if there are a couple games, I think there's maybe one on Sunday, maybe the couple of EPL games on Saturday. I'll try to highlight that as well. So until then, you stay squatting and stop recording.